All these corporate journalists are livid because Marjorie Taylor Greene was tweeting that they can control the weather. Of course, she's referring to militaries, powerful individuals, the general, the man, right? But the media wanted to make it about the Jews because that's the only way they can go after Marjorie Taylor Greene when she talks about geoengineering, cloud seeding, and other weather manipulation techniques that are available. Now, I don't think it's fair to say that the insinuation was that the hurricanes perhaps were created intentionally or guided or directed or something like that, but you didn't explicitly say that. But you did point to Republican areas in the Southeast, and then the implication is there. This results in this massive viral conversation from tons of people about, can the government make hurricanes? Okay, well, that seems a little bold, but some people are talking about actual weather manipulation. We've talked about Operation Popeye a little bit on Timcast IRL because the subject came up where the U.S. military was cloud seeding as a weapon of war to wash out roads in Vietnam. Certainly this stuff does happen, and we also had a viral story recently about major flooding in the Middle East when a cloud seeding program went too far. So we're going to talk about all of this, climate change, all that good stuff, weather, weapons, and whatever. It's going to be fun. It's going to be silly, but we have a massive panel today. So would you like to go first, sir, and introduce yourself?
Hi, David DuByne. I run the Adapt 2030 channel and the Civilization Cycle podcast. I was a former coffee buyer in Myanmar, and when we were purchasing coffee there, circa 2012, we were encountering cold leaf damage, leaf kill on the top, and then the bean density was decreased. But talking to the farmers, they told us that their great-grandfathers, who were also farming at that time in the 1880s, experienced the same cold wave. But you realize, and this is in Myanmar, so I was a global warming believer. So I went back to the end of the 1880s to take a look, and then suddenly I found these cycles through history that ebb and flow food production, and that follows right along with civilization, cycle and decline, apex and decline. So I was thinking, if coffee production's affected by these changes, what happens when global food production's affected by these same changes? And why are your food prices rising and governments are responding around the world right at this second? Well, we're at the beginning of the cycle and the amplification, and that's what I'm here to talk about. And it overlaps right with the weather manipulation as well.
Right on. Sir, who are you?
I am Ransom Goodwin. I'm the host of Mountain High Time YouTube channel. And, you know, I'm not an expert on anything. I've just been around the circle, continually getting banned everywhere because I seem to find the right topics to talk about that are taboo, I guess. So I keep getting banned. And now I'm the co-host with DuByne on Civilization Cycle, where we talk about how things are changing and, you know, some of these things like global warming. I'm not a fan of global warming. I don't believe that, but I also don't believe that governments have enough power to control things as big as hurricanes. I just don't see it happening.
Right on. Sir.
How you doing, guys? Into Thin Air. I run the Into Thin Air channel. I am a creator, private researcher.
You got to slide over to your right a little bit.
Oh, okay, I can hear myself a little bit. Yeah, so I run a weather channel on X, YouTube, and it's kind of blown up now. I focus on other things besides weather, but the weather has been taking over lately, so that's why we're here today. I think it's going to be an awesome conversation.
Right on. We got Shane hanging out, too.
Very excited for this episode today. Shane Cashman, host of Inverted World Live, every Sunday at 6 on YouTube, and Weather Channel Reject, and I study fake clouds.
What's a fake cloud?
Fake cloud, well, there's a classification system. There's a whole bunch of, there's vintage clouds, God-made. Fake clouds were created.
Cumulonimbus?
No, fake clouds are products of either microplastics.
Like God-made, like cumulonimbus?
God-made. Well, just all types of vintage clouds, all classifications of vintage clouds. We have mutilated the clouds over the past 100 years with weather modification, microplastics, cloud seeding, you name it, chemtrails. We'll get into
I heard at one time it rained frogs.
It has rained frogs.
Because what happened was there were small frog eggs that got washed up in like a storm into the air. And then when they came back down, it didn't literally rain frogs, but the eggs landed everywhere. And then people were like, well, there's
also rained fish.
Yeah, I heard that too.
We can connect that to HAARP, perhaps.
That actually happened recently.
Right?
That just happened recently.
What, the fish or the frogs thing?
The fish, I saw the fish one.
That actually, it's not as, I guess I would call it rare based on what you read online. But it's a thing that happens when fish eggs, they're very, very small, get swept up into in a storm or whatever. And then when they come down, there's fish falling from the sky or something.
It's a pretty simple thing to explain. It's not like they're raining out of the sky. There's no fish up in the sky. They're getting sucked up and then they fall back.
Right.
Carried out of a lake.
Water spout
All right,
or
so
something.
the question that everybody wants to hear first, I suppose, did the government make the hurricanes to destroy the Southeast so that Kamala Harris can win the election?
Make or manipulate?
Never let a good
Well, I went for
storm
the
go
most
to waste.
extreme version of the story.
Well, do you guys? You say you
our
don't believe in
I don't believe
hurricanes
that.
being made.
No, I don't think they can control it. Now, manipulating it is another topic because obviously they do have a lot of cloud seeding programs, and a lot on the internet right now. They're talking about lasers seeding clouds as well. And I looked at their experiment, and this is a very small room and a little thing. However, the sun, we just had a flare, that produces enough electrons to seed lots of moisture. So whenever you have a solar flare combined with a hurricane and maybe some manipulations, I think they can do a Ho Chi Minh Trail type thing and make it rain more.
Right.
I just don't think that they're creating the hurricanes. They're just going to where they know they are created or they're already created. You see they put up the plane in this last one.
Of course. And where do you guys fall on that?
I believe they can create them.
Yeah.
I don't think it's as easy as people may think. This is a combination between HAARP, lower level things like NextRad, and then simple radar towers, 5G, towers, things like that. Things can be manipulated. The jet stream can be controlled, and there's definitely examples out there where they have hurricanes that were sitting in one area with a lot of military around them, like the airplanes and stuff like that, as if it was a project. They were working on it. It was getting bigger and smaller, and then eventually dissipated.
When was that?
When?
Yeah, like what
They started doing that in the 40s and
1948.
50s.
when they started creating a hurricane?
Project
They started
Cirrus.
messing with them.
Creating
These-
hurricanes. 1948 is when they started dropping silver iodide
47
bombs into
right.
a Hurricane King. Right.
47 was Project Cirrus.
Yep.
That's when they dropped dry ice into a hurricane, thinking it would dissipate it.
Yep.
It actually caused it to hook a turn right into Florida and actually killed somebody.
So is this the one where they said we're going to choose to work on this hurricane with the planes because we think it's just going to go out to sea? And then when they went back the next day, it actually turned.
Oh, yeah, take a look at this.
And it
went-
was,
and
I
caused, like,
believe it was a
millions
little
of dollars in
sooner than
destruction.
that. It was a little sooner than the next
Right.
day.
So let's pull up our good old fact check. We got Wikipedia here, and the reason I'm using this is because this is what YouTube will put on the bottom of this video.
Yep.
They'll use a Wikipedia source to reject or deny any of the claims made. But this is a Wikipedia for Project Storm Fury, an attempt to weaken tropical cyclones by flying aircraft into them and seeding them with silver iodide. Project run by the United States government from 62 to 83. The hypothesis was that silver iodide would cause supercooled water in the storm to freeze, disrupting the inner structure of the hurricane, and this led to seeding several Atlantic hurricanes. Seeding hurricanes? However, it was later shown this hypothesis was incorrect. Later determined that most hurricanes do not contain enough supercooled water for cloud seeding to be effective. Additionally, researchers found that unseeded hurricanes often undergo the same structural changes that were expected from seeded hurricanes. This finding called Storm Fury's successes into question, as the changes reported now had a natural explanation. The last experimental flight was 1971 due to a lack of candidate storms and a changeover in NOAA's fleet.
But that goes into it. That's manipulation, not creation. That's modification, not creation. There's a huge differential there. That lexicon is very important of creating or manipulating or modifying.
But I'd actually assume that creating is substantially easier than manipulating because planting a seed is very, very easy. Moving a tree is very, very hard, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of like the way I look at it. If so you have a small depression form and then it starts to expand and grow as the storm grows wild and crazy. The implication to me that you could move a 30-mile wide hurricane sounds pretty nuts, but the idea that you could seed with a very small, and I mean very, very small, part in a warm water that creates the beginnings of what could be a hurricane seems much more plausible. Not that I'm saying it's possible. I'm saying it seems easier to plant a seed than move a hurricane.
Right. Well, also think about this very quickly, just some simple math. The technology we're talking about is 60, 70 years old from this page. Mm-hmm. Think about the advancements we've made since then. Mm-hmm. If you think about it, if we drop some dry ice into a hurricane, it spins out of control and they're like, ooh, maybe we shouldn't do that again. That didn't happen. They're going to continue doing this. Weather's the most important thing to a human being. Lyndon Johnson, I believe it was, control the weather, you control the world, you control history. Mm-hmm. He didn't say that for no reason.
So just because we're very much in the beginning of this, and I know there's going to be a lot of the fact checkers spamming the flag button. Here's a story from the AP News. Here's why experts don't think cloud seeding played a role in Dubai's downpour. That's great. I appreciate that from the experts. The important part of the story is that they did cloud seed and do cloud seed in Dubai to increase rain. Whether that resulted in mass flooding or not is irrelevant. All that matters is the AP is outright telling you that governments of the world are cloud seeding intentionally. They are making it rain on purpose. That's normal.
Yeah, Dubai admits that on the record, though. They publicly claim that they do that.
Yeah,
China has as well during the manipulation of weather during the Olympics. So it's not a secret. They're coming out and telling you forthright that it is happening.
Oh, I want to even go back to 1861. There was that colonel they called the Rainmaker who went out to
Yes.
sea and
Flooded.
he literally bombed the atmosphere and said I could create and he had a patent for it, right? And they were like, and then he took credit for every storm.
When was this?
Yeah.
1861.
Yep.
18. What is this? Sorry?
They called him the Rainmaker. I think there's an article maybe in the Intelligencer about him.
You notice even Dubai, though, is still using the old tech. Like you're talking about that is really old tech, but have you seen the planes that they're using now to do it? It's the exact same tech. They haven't changed. I mean, it's like maybe a little more sophisticated, but they're still relying on this idea of seeding nuclei to get water to fall. And, you know, to be fair to the conspiracy theorist, why did we do that on the Ho Chi Minh Trail? We did do that, and we did attack people with the idea that we were making it rain more. So is it that far-fetched that your government might want to sway an election by doing the same thing if they would try to win a war doing it? I mean, you know, that's where I get into the conspiracy part of it, but I just don't actually think that they can do what people are claiming, like as far as pushing a hurricane or moving it around.
I would give, you know, I mentioned planting a seed versus moving a tree. I guess another way to put it is starting a fire is terrifyingly easy, but a wildfire is completely out of your control.
Right.
So is it, you know, I think it is within the realm of possibility that the United States government or other governments have the capability to ignite what would be akin to a fire in an atmosphere.
Absolutely.
But controlling it, I don't know that I believe. Right? Because that's pretty crazy. You can't. I mean, I guess you can control a wildfire with controlled burns to try and direct it in certain directions. So,
I
mean, who
think
knows?
it's possible. I mean, you brought up HAARP and talking about hurricanes. What can you say about that, and why would you say HAARP?
Well, because HAARP is the biggest type of technology. In fact, I believe there's even technology higher than HAARP now. HAARP's been
what
around
is HAARP?
forever.
High frequency active oral radio
Research
program.
Yep.
Yeah, that
And why do
burns
people
the
think that HAARP changes the weather?
It burns
That
the
seems
ionosphere.
made up to me.
Well, they are messing, you know, with the ionosphere, right? But what we're talking about is really small. They're pushing a little bubble up. Nothing the size of a hurricane, nothing the size that could do that.
See, that's not the point, though. For HAARP, though, HAARP's not creating the hurricane. HAARP's adjusting the atmospheric conditions on Earth to allow hurricanes to be formed in a certain area on Earth.
Provided you can keep a
especially
high
with the jet
pressure in
stream.
place.
The problem with
You have
that,
to keep
though,
the high pressure system
is
in
how
place.
could you
That's what I
prove
mean. You have
that
to do
if
that.
all the hurricanes keep coming out of the same spots over time? You can look at all the tracks of them. They're either coming out of the
the
Gulf.
US government really
they're
hates
coming
Florida.
off of Africa, right?
Well,
they start out
Milton formed in a spot we haven't seen a hurricane form in can't even remember how long.
It's
Yeah,
like
about
the
100
fourth in
something
100 years,
years.
something like that. Yeah.
and that's the
super
other
rare.
thing. People keep saying something's rare, and you're looking at an environmental scale of the Earth that's so big.
Right.
We're talking about a fraction. So when we're saying it hasn't happened in 100 years, that's really nothing on a climate cycle at all.
True.
I think
I mean,
I got
nothing.
it.
Yeah, absolutely.
The HAARP thing really it grinds my gears because it doesn't seem to have any substance to it. People just started saying one day that HAARP is controlling weather or affecting weather, and I'm like, I've watched Alex Jones. I've read a whole bunch of crazy conspiracy stuff. I watched tons of conspiracy documentaries going back to when I was a teenager. One day, people are like, HAARP is doing this thing. And as much as I've read the craziest, I can tell you all about the Denver airport and the sub-basements and the lizard people and the horse, the blue demon horse that killed the guy who made it. Right? That's crazy. And the pictures of the German kid with the iron fist. Every time I've read about HAARP, there's this big leap where they're like, they built the thing, also it controls the weather. And I'm like, where's the missing
I think
link
it's
there?
more than just controlling weather. I think they're burning. They'll tell you they're burning a hole in the ionosphere, which is where radio transmissions go. Migratory birds use the ionosphere, the magnets with the cryptochromes. It's affecting something. I think it doesn't just stay in the hole. I think there's a ripple effect, honestly. And other people would say that by doing this, it's. You ever heard of cymatics? Like with frequencies used to make a sound become matter. I think there's something to Tim's point. The leap, that's for me, is where I'm thinking of. If you can control something through frequencies like cymatics does with shapes in matter or sound into matter, that's a reason it could potentially be controlling weather.
I just
scale it up. Now the sun's frequency is changing, so that would also bend and also have changes in Earth's magnetic field. So could you do something at a higher amplification possibility by knowing that resonant frequency is changing, because it's a known fact Earth's magnetic field is declining. It was about 5% per decade, but now has that sped up? I mean, the swarm data has gone offline. So use cymatics and bring it into a different magnetic field state, and then could the output be different because of that different field that it's evolved in?
Yeah, I think there's a potential for something nefarious to be happening there.
I'm concerned about this, right? Because we got a few super chats from people saying that it's either HAARP is disinformation or distraction. One thing that we know that intelligence will do is fake conspiracies. That's the real conspiracy, right? But this is actually true.
Yep.
You seed you poison the well of investigation to make it so that no one let's say a politician committed some crime, and you've got people all over the internet and they're digging into it. You're like, okay, what do we do to stop this? Because it's going to make us look bad. They intentionally seed believable but misdirection. People start chasing after the misdirection, thinking they found something, and they end up in the middle of nowhere, never uncovering what really happened.
Oh, I think there's something probably worse than HAARP. And HAARP might have been something
Absolutely.
Because I don't think the government even really operates it now. It's just the University of Fairbanks, right?
I try to tell people that when a lot of people bring up HAARP, and I'm like, HAARP is like an idea. It's like it's a thought process of a very powerful type of technology, but it's old. And I think it's possible that, the whole term is being used as a distraction now to discredit people who talk about it. I do think there is a technology that's bigger than HAARP that can do exactly what HAARP conspiracy theories are saying that it does, though.
There's also lots of HAARPs.
Yeah, there's a lot. It's not just Alaska.
this one, yeah.
Exactly. There's a lot
Many
of
HAARPs. And if you think, if you
a lot of
believe
CERNs.
that they're,
Are they
I
all
was just going to say, if you
ground-based?
believe that they're
Amazing
smashing
space.
particles at the speed of light together beneath Geneva, that do create microscopic black holes that other people, like scientists, were worried might
but don't
eat up
touch
Earth.
the weather.
This is also possible. Then,
Don't touch the weather ever.
And aren't they building a larger Hadron Collider?
Yes.
I think they're doing black holes now beneath South Dakota at some point.
Yeah, so we have Fermilab, which is a super collider, and that's in Illinois, and it's massive. And then the Large Hadron Collider, which is Geneva, but it's actually bigger than that. It's this massive ring throughout Central Europe. And they want to build bigger ones so they can get to higher and higher speeds and smash particles into each other, simulating the conditions of the Big Bang, they say.
Yeah.
Please stop. Please
Where's the
stop.
power generation coming from that? They're all yapping on about global warming, burning too many fossil fuels, yet they're bringing things at larger scale that require just absurd amounts of power.
Maybe they have to create the hurricanes to fuel.
Power the windmills. Yeah, I get
Well, the crazy conspiracy theory, because this goes way back like 20 years, is that they can produce antimatter using these super colliders.
Yes.
But the amount that they produce is just minuscule. So there's a conspiracy theory that people, and I'm not saying it's true, that the main purpose of the colliders is to mass produce at the greatest scale we can antimatter, containing them in magnetic rings so they don't make contact with matter. Because when antimatter and matter collide, you get a 100% energy release from both particles, which is massive. So the conspiracy theory has long been antimatter weapons would be the most devastating explosive weapon man has yet created. Imagine a nuclear warhead, but it's the size of a hand grenade.
Right.
Yeah.
Or smaller, actually.
Right. I think any of this stuff is possible. I can't say about these hurricanes exactly. I do think that there's people hiding in power who can manipulate stuff. But I also know typhoons attack. Kublai Khan had to fight against typhoons. I don't think there were people back then. Maybe there were old governments with lots of power hiding underneath the ground, controlling them. But we have Russia building tsunami bombs. These things
And
are
well, here's the funny thing
crazy.
about that.
Earthquake bombs.
Tsunami bomb is, we get it. And it's not a conspiracy theory because the mechanism of it is so basic.
Yeah.
We detonate a nuke underwater and it sends a bunch of water.
Yeah.
So the thing is, if someone were to say, we detonate a bomb, superheating an area, creating a depression or something like this, which could, has a 3% chance of creating a large tropical depression, and then maybe a 3% chance of becoming a hurricane, is that so far-fetched?
chemical nucleation. Nobody's talking about carbon black. That's one of the new chemical seeding projects that they're using on top of some of these hurricanes, carbon black, because you get that heating element in there, and then that heating creates upwelling and higher pressure in itself that changes storm patterns. Everybody's focused on silver iodide or, nanometals, the barium, the strontium, and the sort of thing in the atmosphere. But very, very few people are talking about carbon black seeding.
What is that?
Carbon black as just graphene particles.
How do they do it? The same? Are they delivering it the same way?
Yeah, same exact way, same delivery system.
Canisters and stuff or whatever through planes. Interesting. And
But think about the heat absorption on carbon versus a reflective part of like a nanoparticulate of metal that would be reflective, which they use for supposed geoengineering to bounce and block sunlight, but now absorb the heat. And what could you do with that massive amount of heat absorption on a certain area of the storm? Because that's where, it's going to require heat. Because going back to that high pressure blocking system, if you're going to keep a high pressure block there so that hurricane will stay south of it or west of it or wherever, you're going to have to create a high pressure dome that stays there for days and days and days. And how are you going to get that much heat to stay in the same exact area? And the skies would almost turn black from all the dust coming out if they were going to use something at that level to be able to continue to create the high blocking system with the heat like that to create the dome.
What if they had an AI that could calculate areas of the ocean that are ripe for tropical depressions, hurricanes, if they but nudge something? Is that
Bingo.
Yeah.
Bingo.
100%.
That's kind of where,
What do you think?
I'm at with that.
Possible. You could form something again, if you're going to nucleate that to get that formation to start and then upwell and grow from there. But once you get it, then you're talking about chaos. Once it grows into
Where it goes, it goes.
Where it goes, unless you really, the tech is something so far advanced that we don't understand at this point, then how do you put a blocking high pressure that's so vast for weeks to keep a storm that south?
I wonder if the people creating it care about the chaos yet. They're just like, we'll create, see what happens, we'll study it.
It's like playing a big game of Risk, and that's kind of what they're doing. It's like billionaires playing a game of Risk. But again, you got to think about, we're basing all this, like cloud seeding, like those terms are so old. They're from the 40s and the 50s.
Yeah.
This is 80 years ago, 70 years ago. Like the advancements we've made in weather, just because it's not seen, but like Tim said, AI, incredible point, because that AI is so far advanced, so much more advanced than we know it is. Like we get this toy on Grok and that stuff. Those are toys. That's not really AI at all. The real AI is what they're using for this type of weather stuff. It's absolutely true. And I'm glad you brought that up.
The fascinating thing, too, is I remember watching these old sci-fi movies where they're trying to find a chemical formula for a cure or something. And they're in a computer, and the computer's like running simulation, and it shows like the chemicals and everything. And that was sci-fi. AI literally does that now.
Yeah.
So they collect all of our health data, put 10 million different files from various humans and various ailments into the computer and let the AI run through it. And they don't got to do anything. Basically, the AI brute forces all the data and finds patterns. And then it says, we discovered that every single person who is suffering from pancreatic cancer also had this one weird marker that no one's ever noticed before because it can see patterns we can't recognize. Then doctors are like, wow. Then if you take some random person's medical data, load it into the AI, they're going to be like, in 10 years, you'll have pancreatic cancer because you have the same marker as them. We can treat it right now. That's what AI can do that humans can't see. So if you were to load all of the world's weather data in real time constantly into an AI, it's going to show you basically a map of probabilities where storms may form. Our predictive capabilities are going to go through the roof with AI technology.
So you said something though. What do you get? Farmers Almanac's been doing that for so long, where they predict, weather patterns for years in advance using what? Astronomy?
Nature.
Sometimes they're very wrong. Often
very wrong, right? But sometimes they say they're 80% right, but other people say they're 50% right. But
Well,
it's
Solar data too. They use a lot of solar data.
Here's a question. What do you guys think is more complicated to do? Human biology, like understanding human biology start to finish, or understanding weather on a planet? What do you think?
Weather. There's trillions of variables.
You think weather's more in depth than like a human biology?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for a couple of reasons too. I think they're both extremely complex. But with the atmosphere, you're dealing with basically every chemical element and how it could interact in different areas, plus temperature.
Right, within Earth, of course. I'm not talking about like space or the universe.
No,
as a
right.
whole.
But on the surface of the planet, you've got different temperatures, you've got volcanic eruptions. All of these different things are going to interact in ways that are much more difficult to track, especially from the size of the planet. The data points you would need, I'm looking at it from this. If we took an AI and it was just this basic, like, Jarvis.
That's the point I'm trying to keep, yeah.
Input data. If we loaded human medical data, it would probably compile it much more quickly than Earth weather data. Earth weather data, I think, is massively more complicated.
Yeah.
Well,
I can see that, yeah.
Well, I was going to say, kind of look at, they're already using AI for their spaghetti models and all kinds of stuff. But when you think about that, really, if you've seen what happens when you allow an AI to have access to a quantum computer, you're talking about next level computational stuff. So I would agree that with all of the data that we have, they might be able to find the right spot to seed or things like that using AI, and maybe even know where it's going to go. But look how they do the weather now. I mean, they're
Not only that, AI could just be like, if silver iodide is added to this area, the chance of a storm increases to this. It could say if potassium, whatever is a chloride is added to this area, the chance of a storm becomes this. You don't even with like the AI stuff is this is why all of the world's governments are racing full speed towards AI, because it is the most powerful super weapon. Right. You don't need to make the weapon. The AI will just tell you. The AI is just going to tell you, if you heat this one area by 3 degrees in this radius, this will happen. And you're going to be like, okay, you don't need to build a weapon. And then you're going to be like, how do we heat it up? And it's going to say, take these metals and take these things, combine these chemicals, and it'll do it for you.
I think that's what they're doing right now. They're exploiting situation that they've have data for a long time. So if they were going to manipulate the weather, they do know where and what time. I think the problem is they don't have a good understanding of the long cycles of things in order for them to control it the way that people are talking about. Just think about like 536 AD, right? All of a sudden you have empires everywhere. They're expanding, and then something happens, and then followed by several volcanoes, and then everybody's dying. Everybody's starving. It's cold. That could happen like that right now, and they don't even know the trigger. They blame the volcanoes. There might have been some in Ecuador and Greenland and other places, but they don't actually know what the trigger is. And now they're saying maybe there was some kind of cosmogenic, part to that, like the meteoroids adding to it, or possibly the sun did something, and now we're looking at the sun kind of stepping down. And the whole thing with global warming, they're trying to convince you that the planet is going to burn up, and you can look at million years worth of cycles and figure out that we're at the end of a glacial period. So
Interglacial.
The interglacial, yes, excuse me. We're at the end of an interglacial, so it's only going to be going into a glacial from here on out for the next 80,000 years. Not that we're going to be here, but
we did a show. I think it was a few months ago, maybe more than a few months ago. We were talking about the poles shifting, and one of the interesting things that was brought up that I didn't really think about, but it's so obvious, is that there's a glacier in Indonesia. That there's a gigantic ball of ice on top of a mountain in Indonesia. And it seems crazy because it's a warm area, but at the high altitudes, these glaciers take very, very long times to melt. And so thinking of that, and then hearing stories about global warming, it really does feel like, when I hear about climate change scientists and, NOAA or whatever, or the climate scientists and blah, 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 it feels like a kindergartner trying to explain what's going on with the weather without having enough data or understanding of the billions of years. Right. And no disrespect to scientists. This is what humans do. We try to understand to the best of our abilities and make guesses. But there was a point where we thought that the Earth was the center of the universe. And then we kind of figured out later on when we started looking at stuff like, mathematically it doesn't quite make sense. I think there's a strong possibility when you look at everything. I'd say it's a 100% probability. We are wrong about all science. But to be fair, 99.9. What we get right is what we can replicate. We can make video games, we can drive cars. So science does get us to these points where we can predict and make these systems. But to predict global weather, I don't know that humans have been around enough, tracking enough data to really understand what's happening.
Yeah, so let me combine these two ideas, and then Brian, I'd like to get your opinion on it. So going back to this, if you're going to really control weather, not manipulate it, not modify it, you're going to have sensors about every foot on the planet to understand what's going on from the ground level up to what, 18,000 feet, maybe 20,000 feet. The same thing is true with what we get fed with global warming, global temperature data. They don't have sensors everywhere. In the oceans, it's barely covered. They might have a few buoys out there. And we're talking about overall land temperatures. There's very few temperature data stations collecting data anywhere. And they're trying to say the entire planet is heating at this uniform rate in this area, but it's not. So, I'll bring it back to you then. If there's not enough, if we can't bring it down to the square foot level, which we would also need to absolutely go into specifics on how the planet's heating or cooling, then we don't have that much data at all. There's so much uncovered. Like how much uncovered area on the planet is there to try to extract this data from, and then put it into the AI models?
Yeah, I can't say there's sensors all over the ocean. That would be probably impossible. But I think satellites are capable of collecting a lot of that data.
But it would change the next moment that the satellite moves on its second pass around. That would have changed from what it had registered earlier.
Yes and no. I mean, if satellite data is pretty much, with the technology we have, it's pretty much straightforward right then and there on the spot, and it can read it in real time what's changing. So there's someone who posted a video that explained these satellites, how they scan the Earth in like real time, super fast. There's like general scanners and there's detailed scanners within those. Ashton.
Talking about the infrared.
Forbes.
Yes, Ashton Forbes.
the Lockheed Martin.
Yes, he put out. There's a video. I can't remember what it's called.
Global heat mapping.
That might be your answer right there, actually, on how to track things, because that
Satellites
same
can
idea,
do that.
They're
I know
going
they
around the Earth and they're checking in real time using infrared about what's going on. Your phone is doing that. The tablet's doing that. The computer's doing that. All your smart meters are doing that. Your smart appliances are doing that. Your PlayStation, your Xbox, even my Mavic drone, you can adjust the sensors on it to let it know. And they're infrared cameras, and they're just as detailed as the one that you get to use, except for you don't get to record with that. I'm sure China, takes all that data, but that actually is a real thing that they are doing to the planet to keep track of everything, and it's happening down here on the ground level too. And people forget that. A lot of people are getting surprised because they capture themselves in a security camera and then they see that their phone is taking pictures of them nonstop. But it's not just your phone. It's the traffic stop, the traffic cameras. It's all of your mobile devices, your smart meters, all of your smart devices. Everything is doing that in conjunction. So they're getting an immediate, real-time, three-dimensional picture of everyone. So I don't know how you could change that over to keeping track of like weather and things like that. But what's all that going to do if our magnetic field does kind of completely collapse, since it's moving around right now? We have a good example of that 42,000 years ago. That's when all of the other hominids disappeared. So Neanderthal, all of these other humans, they disappeared when the magnetic field collapsed. So we're kind of looking at that situation now.
How do they study that? How do they know that? Like, what evidence?
Rock. They have rock. You have glacial information and different stuff. Most of it comes from rock. They can tell which direction the magnetic field was going at a certain time for lava flows, different stuff like that.
Wow.
Well,
And it's never the Earth. I don't think I keep hearing this thing about the Earth flipping. The Earth physically is not going to flip. The magnetic poles are moving. The geostationary poles are not going to flip. The Earth is not flipping. It's just the magnetic fields. As a matter of fact, at certain times, there's more than one pole. There's like 2 or 3 north poles, 2 or 3 south poles. And there's no way that they could, know what's going to happen in those kind of magnetic environments.
So if we have all that data, and like you said, we can follow these glacier movements and stuff like that and understand what kind of period we're moving into, why are they pushing climate change so bad?
I have no idea.
Every commercial, like a Burger King commercial, will be about climate change now.
Yeah, that same
I think
information
I don't think it
showing
is
that
that way
the
anymore,
ice is
actually.
growing.
So this came up in the
Maybe the
debates. One of the big talking points around the debate with Trump and Kamala was that climate change only got about 30 seconds. And instead of answering the question, they immediately just deflected and started talking about something else. And a lot of people pointed out, wow, when climate change can't get a seat at the presidential debate, it's no longer become a priority for these people.
Right.
One of the challenges for me is, I'm certainly fine with believing that humans are polluting in it to a large degree. And, they want to blame the United States for it, but it's largely Southeast Asia and South Asia. So pollution is bad. But the problem I have is Barack Obama buying waterfront property while advocating for climate change, saying the water levels are going to be rising and things like this. Right. Certainly, you make the argument, yeah, but the water will rise over 100 years. But they've made even crazier arguments. Greta Thunberg said, 4 years ago, we had 3 years left before irreparable damage would take place. Now Greta Thunberg is screaming about Israel. Greta Thunberg made a video where she said, Israel is climate change because the energy companies, they are funding Israel. And it's like, so climate change as an activist thing is dead. Fundraising for it is gone. Greta Thunberg is pivoting to Israel because she's got no career in climate change. I feel like the whole narrative is gone.
Well, think about this.
Slide number 27.
About 12,800 years ago, something happened that eventually caused the ocean to rise 400 feet. The problem with that is that we had a lot of ice. Where is it? No, not immediately. It didn't happen immediately. But my question is where's all of this ice where's all the water gonna come from to raise the ocean?
So this slide is this is the Sahara, and when was this?
6,000 years prior. So you're looking at present data versus 6,000 years prior. So, when you talk about water erosion on the Sphinx, that would be during this time. But, that puts the dating of the Sphinx into question if there's water erosion at 6,000 years prior and they were supposed to create the Sphinx 4,000 years ago. But that's a different topic. But it's showing you that the possibilities of the West African monsoon coming back in and changing pattern right now is one of the reasons we're seeing an enormous amount of floods across North Africa and the Sahel, which comes into the point where I would talk about if we know that certain areas are going to get cooler on the planet and we'll lose crop production, then where would you set up a new growing zone knowing that it was also in change to become more wet from the above ground water resources, and then as well the amount of aquifers below that, maybe the Nubian sandstone aquifer or the Sus aquifer. You know, we're talking about thousands of cubic kilometers of water beneath there that could be tapped and brought up to supplement the above ground water rainfall. And slide 28 is just a little bit easier to want to look at as well. Just a little easier version for you, but you can see the change and also the pockets within that of desertification and also forest, even though it's in the desert. You know, the oases, this is what people talk about. But you can see this Holocene change or the mid-Holocene changes. So we're coming back into a gigantic change. They're not building the new Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia that's filling to have the largest hydroelectric project in Africa, in one of the driest parts of Africa, unless you know the cycle's changing to consistent rainfall.
So I have a question, right? You're saying that, 6,000 to 8,000 years ago, Sahara was largely forested?
6,000.
6,000 years ago. Honest question, what happens to all of the organic matter as it starts drying up and decaying? Are there remnants left behind, or does it disintegrate into brittle dust, or what?
Well, that's part, but then the sand, because there's no more root structure to hold that, yes, you'll find an enormous amount of, I wouldn't say petrified, but root stock there of the larger trees that's still beneath the sand, and also the massive, massive amount of buildings, ancient cities, aqueducts, and things that were through those trade routes there from over at the Red Sea all the way to the Atlantic stretching back.
Wait, you're saying that in the Sahara, there's evidence of ancient cities and all this stuff?
Everywhere.
Oh, wow.
Everywhere.
That's cool.
Well,
You ever heard of Michael Tellinger?
I have.
He does a lot of the
South
Africa stone circles. That's basically along the same concept. These are thousands and thousands of years old, and it's like like sound frequency designs. They're not structures where people lived. These are like power plants almost, in a way. It's wild stuff. Michael Tellinger, incredible guy.
They find petroglyphs out there in the Sahara that show hippo, giraffe, all kinds of stuff. We know that area was a wetland for multiple times. Back into the Pleistocene, too, there was all kinds of animals. That's one of the areas that man was first running around in North Africa.
Do we have that graph of remember we were talking last night about the Honga Tonga volcano that went off?
And there's where all your water's been coming from.
I do. I
Right
have
over
that here.
North Africa. If you notice it, that's what's
slide
painting
number
in
9.
Africa looking green right now.
Slide number 19. And we could talk about the African mega lakes. You see those black structures in that last one. Those are mega lakes, larger than our Great Lakes. But this is the amount of water vapor that had been pushed up into the upper atmosphere, into the mesosphere from the Hunga Tonga eruption. Now, this goes through every single layer further down, and you'd know, but this is in the mesosphere up around 85,000 feet. Look how much extra water is up there right now. Wow.
Yeah.
This explains a lot of different cloud formations that are happening, and you can bring it down into the different hectopascals. You know, 10 is the highest there, but we get down to like 26 HPA or 26.
Now, why was there so much flooding after 2022?
Yeah, because additional 14% more moisture in the Earth's atmosphere ejected in a single event.
And this was in 2022?
Correct.
Talk about cloud seeding.
So what do you think is going to happen? That it's going to rain a whole lot, and then we're going to get way more water on various parts of the planet?
Well, not that, but you could probably explain it better. Like when this water is coming back out, how does it integrate with the storms? Now, you can ride on top of a natural cycle to get a larger output, and this is what I think you're getting into with trying to manipulate these weather systems now. If you knew there was more moisture coming in from the rain out of all the water, 14% more moisture in our atmosphere coming out at a certain rate, depending on how high it is in the atmosphere, Earth's magnetic field is changing, and then you're going to ride on top of this natural cycle and try to create a different outcome of these previously unattainable, because everything is now, there's 2 extra variables in there for you to actually manipulate on top of what you could do with the regular cloud seeding or what you're talking about with NexRad over there, which I had a couple questions about the power output on NexRad and the actual storm and the watts per meter squared from the sun. Now, this is interesting here since you're on that slide. This is the Shepherd's Cross coming up on December 6th this year. Now, electromagnetically, will it generate larger earthquakes, or is there a possibility for storm enhancement during this time? Jupiter, Earth, Mercury, Sun, Venus, Earth, Mars in this cross, and they call it the Shepherd's Cross.
When's the last time that happened?
I don't have a date for you. You'd have to look
But
it up.
it's something that happens.
So
It
what
is.
is it?
Well, if you believe it's just strictly gravity, if you think that the Jupiter being one of the largest gravity bodies, I'm more into the electromagnetics of it versus just strictly gravity pulling. Mercury, as its iron core, is well known to shut down sunspots when they're directly Earth facing, so there's some interaction there. So if you have the largest gravitational body in with the Earth with a known iron core planet that shuts down or amplifies, it has an effect on solar activity in a line crossed with those other planets. So what would you think would happen? This is a lot of science will be learned at this time. You know, people are saying, no, the planets don't have anything to do with generating earthquakes or seismic activity, volcanic eruptions, mud flows, nothing like this. But we will see for sure, because this is a very specific date on the 6th. So we can look out forward and say, well, this could have an effect.
You said what day is this happening?
December 6th of this year.
Okay.
At 1:27. Is that Eastern time?
It seems like
UTC or Eastern?
date.
Yeah, I'm good.
they don't use
UTC.
all of the stuff whenever they're talking about like why something happens. Like if you were talking about the floods, you would have to add all of these ideas. There was a comet that just went by the sun. We've had that probably sparked solar flares. Or at least interacted with it. And we know that solar flares, when we have a geomagnetic storm, affects cloud seeding as well.
Right.
So, and then you add Tonga, that was all of that ocean water put up that's extra, right? And then everybody's like, why are we having these, 100-year floods or 200-year floods, 1,000-year floods? Well, 14% more water in the atmosphere might explain something, and it's going to even out, though. It is ocean water. It came from the ocean. It wasn't extra water like from a glacier or something.
So you're saying this is to be expected if you know this type of history, but also there's possibility for people who know this is happening to take advantage of it.
Yeah,
exploit it.
I don't see why not. If you knew that there was more moisture available and your cloud seeding programs might not work as well as you want them, it may work better knowing that there's more moisture in the atmosphere, just for the conspiracy theorists.
Yeah.
What
thank
is
you.
this currency slide that you have? It says currency is used predominantly in commerce since 1450, and it shows that every currency lasts about 100 years.
Right, and then you start to overlay it with the longer-term solar cycles here and the different, if you're going to look at Schwab cycles or de Vries cycles, you start to see this overlap of at least a slice of time from 17 to 1900. They when you're hitting those low periods, it seems that the reserve currency changes. Now, if we're coming into this exact same cycle once again, and we are coming to this low point where almost every space agency out there is forecasting a grand solar minimum or extreme low solar activity as we step off of solar cycle 25 coming into 26. They're off by one cycle, but then again, with this amount of solar activity, nobody really got it right this time either with the exceptional amount of ramp up. So if we're really following this and the energetics are understood by those that don't generally talk about it to the public or allow the public to know, that in the energetic cycle would also signal the end of a reserve currency period, then we're starting to see that, the formation of the BRICS right now. We're moving into a different currency itself. So I'm just wondering why. This is an anecdotal side point here, that these cycles, energetic cycles, match up with currencies and the lifetime of a currency on a reserve status.
Interesting. And now you've got the BRICS nations launching a brand new currency.
Why now?
Political opportune moment? I don't know.
Energetic change moment could be both.
But the energetic change, does that mean that powerful governments are recognizing the change and intentionally launching new currencies? Or is it just that it creates a dynamic, a shift in power in different regions of the planet that will amplify one group over another, regardless of what group is there?
Right, depending amount of food production for those countries as well. Because a civilization without food is no civilization. The basic, if you bring it down to a basic, if a human doesn't eat, there is literally nothing called civilization. So food is the most important thing. We could talk about economy and we could talk about, business and government, but without food, there is literally nothing on this planet that can be structured. That's the base building block that everything moves forward from, is food.
Can we predict food production in BRICS nations right now? Is the yield going to increase?
I would say yes, if they turn North Africa and the Sahel into a new growing area, and the amount of investment that would be required to restart a global economy on the debt-based system, taking North Africa and the Sahel from zero to where we are in America and what we sit at in our grow belts across the United States and Canada. Imagine the amount of trillions and trillions of dollars that would be required for the roads, the irrigation systems. And then how would you pay all these people that come from around the world to work there? Well, you would pay them in cryptocurrency. You would pay them in stable coins that would have a value of, I don't care if you came from Chad or South Africa or America or Argentina, that you go back and you still have that 1 = 1. And you see this rapid implementation of cryptocurrencies across. I mean, they're going to use for payment systems as well as investment. I really believe if we're going to lose crop production, 45 north and above, and a lot of areas on the planet have far less crop yields, we're going to have to make that up elsewhere for 8 billion people to survive. So where would you put that? But remember, we have to restart the global economy.
Can they restart Africa and start growing there within our lifetime? Is that something?
It's absolutely, if the rainfall patterns continue to increase at the rate they are now, and they tap the Nubian sandstone aquifer and other aquifers beneath there, and get that underground water resource coupled with the above ground increases, absolutely yes.
Would change everything.
That would absolutely.
Change everything. It's a crazy thought.
It's larger than the United States and Canada combined as a growing area for what we consider crop production.
Wow.
And a double rotation crop, because where it sits with the sunlight patterns there, we get 2 yields out of that versus
And
one.
who's going to be growing it? Is it going to be some terrible poison seeded?
It'll probably be GMO, yeah, Bill
Monsanto,
Gates. You know, this is kind of where me and him intersect. He's following all of these trends on grain production, and then I'm scamming through the articles, and it's just article after article about shutting down farmers, shutting down private ownership of farms, shutting down people's ability to grow stuff. Yeah. I mean, you see it constantly. It's not just here, it's in Europe too. Like they're literally telling farmers, paying them to grow bird, flowers and stuff instead of growing food. And then you have the major grow zones like the Ukraine and what's going on there. So you know that production is going to be going down, and even possibly contaminated in the near future. If you guys remember Chernobyl, that was only a 100-year cap on that thing that they put, and they've admitted since then. They went back in the 90s and worked on it more, and they're still estimating less than 50 years until that thing burns through their concrete cocoon that they put on there. And that will waste Eastern Europe there. I mean,
I believe they created fake clouds to help put out Chernobyl too. Just want to put that out there.
No, they dropped it on Belarus. Well, you were talking about that, weren't you?
Listen, I just looked this up, actually. It's funny because we're talking about the Honga Tonga volcano and all the moisture in Africa. You would think more hurricanes would come from that, like that, because those storms come off North Africa over the Cape Verde Islands. There's been significantly less since 2022. There wasn't actually a single hurricane in 2022. I'm seeing 2. There was 2. There's Beryl, which was this year, and then there was one other in 2023. So none for 2022, one for 2023, one for 2024.
And you know what's funny about that is they were estimating that this hurricane season would have 33 named storms.
Yes,
you remember? They were
yes.
pushing that there was going to be a bunch of hurricanes, kind of fizzled out, but we had a couple powerful ones instead.
I'm wondering, could you cloud seed the Sahara to turn it into a growing area? Or, I mean, it's absolutely massive, so I don't know that any kind of, an irrigation plan to bring seawater in to create atmospheric moisture would be a massive endeavor.
Nah, they would just tap the aquifer there.
Fresh
there's
water.
no need for
You
any
can
of
just
that.
tap the aquifer and then water comes up.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can look for sandstone aquifer Africa map, and you could take a look at the amount of
One of the
aquifers
biggest
being-
aquifers in the world there, right?
Yeah, it's the
Aren't
largest.
they doing a big project like this in China too? They have a big area they're trying to grow that's like inhabitable right now.
Sandstone aquifers. Oh, this is not a
Of
specific
Africa.
thing.
You know, it really seems like all the global warming, all of the whole craze, and some of these projects that they're doing. I'm not including the
So that is this
seeding and stuff,
the
but think
Nubian
of-
sandstone aquifers. I'm sorry.
no, that's right.
That's what Gaddafi was tapping to grow 100,000 acres of sorghum as a test project at the very base of Libya, which was also where one of the African mega lakes drainage basins was. So they were trying to also, they knew it was going to be raining more, so they were going to capture in a lake fashion the water from there, and they were also having large pipeline systems bringing water after they would pump it up and then take it out to these test areas. And before the invasion, and one thing with the U.S., we blew up all their water infrastructure. We blew up all of the water pipelines. Wow. Which was interesting that you would think we should learn from that.
Do you? So then, is it possible? And I'm just going to throw this out there. Western interests, knowing about food production, reserve currencies, view the expansion of a Saharan grow area as a threat to the reserve currency, the petrodollar. So they destabilize the region, preventing them from creating food in the area.
Until they're the ones who set it up.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
They
But
do
again-
it in Haiti and Guatemala for other reasons.
And think about this.
Bananas.
Why did we destabilize that whole area that we're looking at there? Libya, all the way, all of that has been destabilized. And millions of military-age men left their countries that they would be at. So later, when corporations come in there and move, there's no one going to be fighting any kind of tyranny there because all of their male population is moved.
Almost seems
Yeah,
like
10
it's
million
by
man,
design.
10 million
Not only
standing
that,
armies
they
gone.
moved to a grow zone that they're shutting down, which
Yeah.
is
And then
Europe.
what? The West comes in, takes it over, turns it to a grow zone they control.
That's right.
Right.
Wasn't Gaddafi making his own currency too? That
Yes.
we were upset
Gold
about?
backed, yeah.
Right.
And he was working on this aquifer idea.
I didn't know about that.
He was doing a lot of things they didn't like.
Man.
Yeah, well, if you really think about what they're doing, it seems like this is kind of where I was going. You have like Bill Gates and all these other people doing these projects, like out in New Mexico, they put sulfur up in the atmosphere and stuff to supposedly block the sun. I think they know that the temperatures are going down, which is going to move grow zones. So Europe is going to be cold like it used to be. And now you have all of these millions of people that they moved out and moved in there. So those people are going to be reducing in population, so to speak. And this is all happening at the same time, but they will be around to take credit for protecting us from global warming.
Right, right.
I mean, literally, we did this program, just like he's kind of acting like he's protecting you against the next pandemic. It's the
Problem,
same
reaction,
idea.
solution.
Yep.
Yeah, and by admitting that this weather control is possible and admitting that global warming is here, we're kind of putting it into their laps where now they can take it and say, look, the temperature cooled when this grand solar minimum comes in and we're saving you. Now you have to pay us every single year to continue this program so we can keep the planet cool. It's a wealth transfer program, and they're riding on top of these natural cycles in order to manipulate the mind through all these preset narratives like global warming. If I knew the cycle was coming in enough to change weather where every single person would see it in front of their eyes, I would have to make an excuse or build a narrative into that.
Right.
And also
Also let
OPEX is
emergency
almost like
go
the
to waste.
vaccine.
Isn't that what they
Yeah,
call
yeah.
it?
Yes, you know,
Never
in the
let,
same
yeah.
ways they
Same
built
thing with the
fear,
storm.
right?
Yeah.
Same theories
That's
with the
interesting.
storms. If something's brewing and they can take control of it, they're like, you know what, this one's a good one. Let's use this. There's stuff going on they need to push. This is something I want to bring up before I forget.
Oh, the one on the left, right? That one, right? Yeah, you got it. That's all the aquifers that are beneath Africa right there.
Yeah, there's a video we should check out in a little bit. It's from a
that is
TV show.
massive.
Yeah.
But so they could. It doesn't seem like the greatest undertaking, if that's the case, to begin reclamation of the Sahara. I pulled up an article on the Great Green Wall, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with. They're planting rows of trees to stop the expansion of the Sahara Desert.
Yeah, just look at Dubai, right? So whether cloud seeding is real or not, they believe it. They have a whole mission control center like NASA acting like they're controlling
Well, cloud seeding is absolutely real. It is not science fiction. I don't even know why people dance around that. It's been done for a very, very, very long time. And that's why I pulled up the article from the AP that says, don't blame cloud seeding for the flood, which is to literally say, of course they're doing it. They do it all the time, but it's not why it flooded. Fine, I don't care what your reason is. They are cloud seeding.
No, they definitely know how. I mean, they proved it in Vietnam that we can take a cell or a storm that's already going to come through and kind of make it dump rain faster or before it was going to. Like, say, if you were doing that to the U.S., I don't know, you might make droughts where it rains in the wrong place or something like
In
that.
the late 80s, early 90s, they're already worried about so many flights that the Midwest was losing like 30 days of sunlight because of the amount of clouds being formed by the smoke trails.
Right.
And that's
Like 9/11, they said there was literally nothing happening all of a
Right.
sudden because no planes were flying.
look what happened during lockdowns. They shut the world off, and all of a sudden people could see the Himalaya mountains again.
Right.
It's crazy. Blue skies all of a sudden.
So you're saying that the lockdowns, well, I mean, they wrote this in the New York Times, the world is healing.
Lockdowns opened up natural sky for the first time in a long time.
But what, is that because humans weren't driving anymore and there was less pollution?
Perhaps driving, but flying, everything was
Right.
kind of grinded to a halt. Industry, a lot of places stopped.
I noticed the bugs came back.
Bugs
so
came back.
do you know about the windshield phenomenon? Yeah. When I was a kid, you'd go drive down the highway and you'd get out of your car and it's covered in bugs. You go on a road trip, it's you're stopping to get the bugs off. Yep. Not so much anymore.
No.
Well, recently, in the past couple of years, cars covered in bugs.
Yep.
I noticed there's a lot of wildlife here, and I travel everywhere. And that is one thing that I noticed that is different from when I was a kid is that phenomenon, but not just with the bugs, with the animals. When I was a kid, there would be animals every 5 feet on the highway.
Yeah.
Like literally everywhere. I don't see that anymore.
Now they're saying the next great lockdown might be the climate lockdown.
Oh, for sure. They want climate
Right.
lockdowns.
But I don't know how you muster that up.
Slide 8.
Slide 8.
Well, I just wanted to show you this one here because it's relevant. It's occurring right now. So we're coming into this high solar activity period, and that's if you go to Syslo, you can find the sunspot average count daily on this one, and that's that chart right there on the left with the yellow. And at the bottom, this is off Dr. Roy Spencer's site at the University of Alabama, Huntsville. So you can see how as the solar activity is increasing, the temperature is increasing. And if you go to the next slide, I kind of zoomed in on both of those. There you go.
Wow.
So we got solar activity increasing, ramping up, and you saw massive ramp up. And then
it's higher than the past decade plus.
yeah. And this is where everybody got it wrong. So every forecaster out there, 0% were correct on how high the solar activity was. I was also incorrect calling that we were heading into a cooling period. But it seems whatever was going on, we're at that transition phase where nobody got it right. And perhaps this solar cycle 26, now space agencies are going, oh, we're coming into very, very low solar activity predicted for sunspot counts through this solar cycle 26.
Do you think there's a possibility of the big one, the solar flare that fries all of our electronics?
I am super glad you asked that. Slide 4, please.
Slide 4.
Slide 4. I was already thinking about you.
Here we go. Uh-oh, this looks scary.
There's a lot of red
Should I be
here.
scared? There's a lot of red.
What's going on right now as we're in this room?
Yeah, so the top X flares from this year so far. So the X9 was just yesterday, and you saw the aurora around here too. Last night we were outside. We saw
crazy.
Everywhere.
We were outside.
Northern Lights in West Virginia.
We were outside the hotel. Some of these pictures are insane that we got last night. Unreal.
Yeah, Brian and I were outside. Yeah,
West Virginia.
He and
That's
I were outside
crazy.
last
The
night.
pictures
And
I
just
saw,
keep
nuts pink in the sky everywhere.
Keep in mind on this chart, so the Carrington event is like an X, let's say 40, because they don't know whether it's 35 to 48 is kind of the estimate. But look at all these. These are all little in comparison to that. So what we're talking about that would hurt society, satellites, wires, would have to be like an X40 or above. And that that's just not there. But these can affect
bigger.
human health.
Yeah, well,
getting
not,
bigger.
yeah, not only that, and I got
They're getting bigger, but notice the months on them too. They're getting larger, but notice the months that they're occurring.
Right.
So we have these groupings of May, and then we got September, October on the largest ones, and you notice they're coming up in scale. So I thought to myself, if you go to the next slide, I thought to myself, I'm going to go take a look at the solar geometry. So this is in May, and the Earth is on the other side of the sun, and we got the squaring planets. They're starting to form their square. So Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, they're beginning to get into this final configuration, which we'll have at the end of the month here. So if the largest of the flares are coming as that same configuration's forming, but the Earth's on the other side of the sun, and then continue to the next slide, then here we are at the end of this month. We're going to be in the middle of that field. So my conjecture is that if we were, I'm saying if, not predictive, but if following the trend, larger solar flares would be occurring in these next 3 weeks just based on the ramp up and where we sat and how the outer gas giants were forming in their square formation. And will we see electromagnetic changes on the planet? And this is why governments are preparing for so much. Because if we are going to experience an electromagnetic difference of change, your perception of reality is going to change.
Yo, this is wild. I just Google searched. This is from the last night.
Yeah.
Northern Lights in West Virginia.
Yeah. Right.
So we are not that far north. I mean,
X9. Now, what if it's an X11? Then you're going to see this, and it'll be moving
When you
this
say
time.
your perception of reality is going to change, what do you mean?
I mean, just the way that humanity views the meat suit that decodes this construct in front of you will change in a different magnetic field. You talked about cymatics. You change the frequency, the shape changes on the plate.
Yeah.
So change the magnetic field, and then how does your brain, that the lobes of your brain electrically connected, and that electrical connection is going to vibrate higher? How's that going to change how the information flows between and what you optically see or hear?
they did experiments where they put this helmet on people and blasted them with massive electromagnetic waves, and they said they felt the presence of God.
Yes.
What if there is, I don't know, an X40 that fries all the electronics and then just shocks people's brains into feeling the presence of God?
We were just lifted.
What would that civilization turn into? What would we turn into?
I am glad you brought this up.
Wild.
He's on it.
I'm glad you brought this up because we're entering in the age of I don't know if you know what the hydrogel platform is. It's basically nanotech, right? So you can affect nanotech with electromagnetic waves, and they're doing experiments on rats and on like flies and stuff. So I get that that's not human, but they can control the behavior of either the rat or the flies, from everything to making them excited sexually, hungry, not hungry, mad, angry, all of that stuff. So if you can imagine, some of the conspiracy theories out there talking about 5G and all of these other things, think about a world that has less of a magnetic field. So in other words, the background magnetic field of the Earth is not as strong as it normally is. It would be a lot easier to use these programs to manipulate people into all kinds of things. And like I said, everything from hunger to anything.
I feel like the hunger, the starvation part's not so much there, although in some parts of the world it is. But in terms of people losing their minds, you could say lockdowns had a lot of a profound effect on people's mental health, but it just seems like people have lost it.
Well, and like what he just brought up, you could literally make someone feel like they're having a divine experience.
Yeah.
And then think about this. If you're looking up at the sky, and this is probably what a lot of ancient people, this is probably why a lot of the petroglyphs are the way they are. They were looking up at the sky, seeing all this stuff, and this is a small flare. Imagine, like I said, an X40 or plus, what kind of auroras you would be seeing. Maybe the dancing squatter man on the poles or something like that.
I've noticed already, just online over the last day, there's like mixed feelings of what people are going through. Like some people are feeling sick, some people are feeling like enlightened, so people are on different levels. Everyone's different. And like you said, the magnetic field is much weaker than it used to be. So these flares that are 9s and 10s are actually like much higher in comparison to what they would be if it was, 6,000 years ago?
Yeah.
When the magnetic fields weren't that affected?
Well, when the KP
Tighter,
index goes
stronger.
up, they have a chart somewhere that shows the interactions of people. They have heart palpitations, all kinds of stuff. People with
the physical
pacemakers
effects.
and different stuff are in danger when the KP level is at 9. So you would just imagine massive amounts of solar radiation coming in when there is no magnetic field, when it's collapsing. And right now it is. And we know that the last time that happened, like I said, about 42,000 years ago, Neanderthal disappeared. So
It's called the God helmet. I just pulled it up. It's got a Wikipedia entry that means it's real.
It's real.
And it wasn't intended to have this effect. They were trying to send different magnetic pulses using what does it say? A modified snowboard or snowmobile helmet or something? Snowmobile helmet with solenoids placed over the temporal lobes. The device produces magnetic fields that Persinger described as weak but complex, 1 microtesla. So actually not strong. I was wrong about that. The pattern of fluctuation in these magnetic fields is derived from physiological sources. For example, patterns that appear in EEG traces taken from limbic structures. People began to experience mystical presences, mystical experiences in altered states, and that they felt some kind of religious experience from this.
Does it say
Frequencies will mess with you, man. I mean, look at LRAD stuff. It can make you feel like your skin's burning when they point it at you.
Does it mention MK Ultra anywhere in there?
No, but when I was younger, there was this cafe in Chicago that they said was haunted, and someone said they were pushed down the stairs. There's a bunch of crazy stories about it, and it's in like this forest preserve kind of area. And so I started reading more and more about ghosts, because who doesn't love reading about ghosts? And I was reading these studies that some researchers, because I'm not interested in some ghost hunter going in with a fake device and deciding that it means there's ghosts. No. I want to know what actual researchers who are exploring this through empirical means. And they said that they think it may be the result of magnetism or low frequency vibrations, which cause disturbing feelings in people. You can't just feel the vibration, it's too low frequency, or the magnetic waves, but it has an impact on how your brain is functioning, how your body is functioning, and then you start to feel a presence in the room with you and other things like this.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, we talk about the X40, the massive solar flare, the various ways that society will go insane if they all of a sudden experience a variety. Some people are going to think they're seeing demons. Some people will see angels. Some will see machine elves. Who knows?
That article that just came out, of people seeing these weird demon faces. They're actually considering it a medical condition now. Like
People seeing demons?
Yeah, please look this up.
That's just
please.
propaganda to help keep the demons safe.
Honestly, that's where my brain's going now. It's like, all right, so we're going to start seeing these things. That's exactly where my mind went.
I'm waiting for the
new one.
There's your perception reality change. What if we start to see through the darkness? We actually see the aura of, or
Well, Tim and
the being itself.
Wait.
recently about the glasses and the certain filters people have to see.
Oh, the Dionysian blue glass.
Right, the blue
What is
glass.
that?
Remember that thing? I think
I've been looking for a pair of those. If anybody has a pair of Dionysian blue
glasses
glasses,
with
I'd
pilots.
want them.
What is that?
Second that.
What is
Can you
it?
explain
Yeah.
what those do and what happened when people look through them?
Yeah, it tears apart at least. Like you can look through infrared or you can look through thermal and you can see different, but that's going through. You're not really bending light waves at that point. These Dionysian glasses are able to bend the light waves, and then the perception of what you can see in front of you, instead of just being constructed in like Roy G. Biv.
Right.
It deconstructs that into. I don't understand exactly how it works. It's multi-layers of this glass that allows you to see in a different light spectrum, not frequency, but a spectrum. But I guess they're the
And
same.
some people were
But
saying
you
they
the
saw
vibration.
You
demons.
just buy these.
Is that like the
Used to be able to. They've making that glass very difficult to find now.
Is that like the thing about the original night vision
That's
that made the
also what I was
soldiers
getting
go
at.
nuts?
Soldiers were
Yes.
using that originally, and they all saw just creatures
Straight up
walking.
monsters.
Yeah, straight
What?
up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yo, look at this story from NBC News. Rare disorder causes man to see people's faces as demonic. The condition causes faces to appear distorted. My first thought was I woke up in a demon world. Yo, like, what if you did?
Yeah, no, you did.
What, you mean to tell me that he literally saw people with bat-like pointed ears and stretched out faces and eyes?
You have a pill for that.
Tim, do you know when this article came out?
Don't take it.
There's only
Watch this
only
guy.
65 side
March
effects.
2024.
This was right around the solar eclipse.
Oh yeah.
If you
When
watch
they
the
were
music
shooting
video
rockets.
to Black Hole Sun,
Great.
all
Oh,
you see are these weird faces during this eclipse, just like that article. It's very odd.
Maybe he's very sensitive to electromagnetic field changes, and he's seeing it before us.
I can't find anything on this Dionysian blue glass.
They scrubbed it. It's just like how
D-
Wayback you saw
I think
Wayback
it's
Machine got hacked
DY.
yesterday, and all the archives are gone.
Nocian Dionysian.
What is
Also,
it,
didn't,
DY?
didn't
Yeah,
they
it's a DY.
prove that like different emotions like fear, hate, love, like you're putting off a certain frequency at that time, and if those frequencies are changed in the atmosphere, that's what's causing people to, I don't know, go crazy or feel enlightened, like we were talking
sure?
about before.
Maybe that's why they
find
tested out the 6 foot away from each other.
You're-
thing.
I see DIONY.
You know, they told everybody to separate.
Could be. It'll be a blue glass.
But they admitted
Maybe
they
some
just
different
made it up.
Timeline. To dial it back real quick and talk about the solar flares before we get into more demon faces, do you think they had anything to do with the cell phone stuff that kept happening? Like just before the hurricanes,
No results for
Horizon went out,
Dionysian
right?
blue glass.
Yeah. Oh,
I'm telling you, I'm going to find it before
A few months ago, there was a huge outage for multiple cell phones.
Yeah.
yeah.
Are those
Actually,
connected to this? Is that something?
I thought that was supposedly a software glitch.
Is that what that is? Because
think that's what they said.
Why I keep thinking about it is because there's articles that keep saying they're warning us for the internet apocalypse, and they're blaming it on
dry
the sun.
runs, bunch of dry runs.
Right,
It's like,
'cause I don't know if the sun can actually.
A lot of
do
people
that.
think that, you know, if we do have one of these big flares that will be put back in the Stone Age. Do you know how long it took Elon Musk to put up SpaceX?
Mm-hmm.
Those are disposable satellites, low Earth orbit. They don't care if those go down.
Right.
They could just put up
Dicinium.
another 100 of them in one
Dicinium?
launch.
Right.
It's just
right.
a matter of
spell it?
time before there's
DIC?
a massive blackout.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is it wouldn't be
ANIN.
like the end of things. It would be
Real
a reset,
aura.
definitely.
Yeah. They live.
But they could set up all of this stuff really easy now. We've got to where everything's disposable. So they could put up internet in a matter of a week after something like that.
Right.
Yeah, you can buy
But it
them.
wouldn't be for us.
Right. It's for,
They're the
we're not gonna
original
get
chemical formula.
that. You found them.
I'm sorry, we got into the middle of the conversation. Didn't interrupt there.
You found the glasses.
Rappler says false. U.S. makes dicyanin dye illegal because of supernatural properties. Now the fact checkers confirmed it, so it's
Wait.
I
The
do
fact,
think
the,
that
wait.
was
The
the fact
fact check is saying that they won't allow it because you do see ghosts.
No, they're saying
It's never happened.
it is false to claim that they've made the dye illegal because of supernatural properties.
I'm saying, was
I
it the
thought you were saying the
original
opposite.
glass
Cyan and
production compared to today's modern glass production? You know, you're looking at two different types of production models, levels, and years. So I'm sure what's being done now might not be the same original formula for the glass that it was when when the military was using it, and it freaked out the soldiers so bad. They're like, we can't put these on anymore.
I remember hearing something about that exact thing there.
Yeah.
But
I see a
they were
bunch of
freaking out
TikTok
'cause they
videos
saw
about it,
stuff.
but I don't see any articles or anything writing about it. Just this.
They scrubbed it.
U.S.
Yeah,
military.
there's viral TikTok videos where they're claiming that, what is it? You see weird things. They made it illegal because people can see the astral plane when placed between two glasses.
Interesting.
So it's
I mean, it sounds like an easy
mushrooms
thing to
without
test, right?
Having to eat anything, I guess.
Yeah, we'll have to get
That's what I'm saying. I'm looking for a pair. If anybody has them, please, I'll buy them, or you can send them. I want to test
Well, can you not get? They say it's not illegal. Can you make them? Can we make a pair of these glasses and give
Any
them
chemists out there that we could get help?
Right, just get
We'll break
some
through that
glass
as well.
and make them.
So going back to the initial seed of this conversation, look, I did it too.
Yeah. That's why we tell everybody that wear their headphones.
know.
They stop talking to the microphone.
What did you see that might have been anomalies or not anomalies with these storms as they traveled through the into the country? You didn't see any.
I don't think that I saw anything. I mean, I'm really looking. The only thing that I can say is, not to fuel the conspiracy theories, but if you remember in 2020, a hurricane plowed through right at the north part of Florida and Georgia, which put out a bunch of voters at that time. So I think that's kind of feeding this one,
Right.
As far as the election thing and anomalies. I don't know, because it didn't take but five seconds to look on the internet and find out several storms, just like Helen. Matter of fact, too, like one in 1916 and another one, I think, in the 50s, did that same path, flooded the same area, not to the extent. But still, I mean, there's pictures of like Asheville, North Carolina, with water up halfway through the stores and stuff. Yeah. So it did happen again. And not only that, I'm a nerd. So I've watched a lot of programs like when I was a kid on PBS and then other stuff. And I used to read, Popular Mechanics and all that stuff when I was a kid. I remember reading about storms that they detected sand from the Gulf all the way up in the upper Ohio River Valley. And then you got to think about civilizations like Cahokia, the Cahokia civilization. They were a big civilization down the Mississippi, flooded out, gone totally. So they had a civilization ending event, and it was probably because of one of these storms.
Do you think a lot of this conspiracy stuff about it, because I believe they can manipulate these storms and perhaps even make them, but do you think we have, as a society, lost trust in anyone who's claim to be the authority and truth?
I do, because I mean, think about it.
Question.
When you keep hearing fact checks and the authoritative sources, these are the same people that get busted lying over and over and over and over and over again. I mean, so it is hard to believe them when they say, "Hey, we're not doing that." So the weird part is, why did they just come out and say, "Yeah, we are manipulating the weather. We are seeding it"? I mean, that's kind of where I was going. I think that they have a plan to take credit for the weather not, getting super hot and us not going into global warming. And the idea, like, why are they pushing us to extinction levels of CO2? It makes absolutely no sense. What are we at? Like, I think 419 or 420 parts per million. A little less, and we're at extinction levels. I mean, why would they do that? It doesn't make any sense at all. And when you look through like all of the different eras of dinosaurs and all that stuff, CO2 skyrocketed, it's warm, plants are everywhere. That's good. Why would we be fighting that? People die from the cold. They're not really dying from the heat.
Right.
7,000 parts per million was the Cambrian time.
So there's a bunch of these dicyanin glasses. But like,
back to that.
it's all just, well, I've been trying to find to buy them, right?
I know, right?
And they're like $10.
An original pair with the original dye in it, not the knockoffs that are being made now. There's a huge difference in the glass itself.
So apparently, it's I'm reading any chemist can easily synthesize the dye and make them, like with relative ease. And so,
again, a quality any chemist
a
out
chemist
there.
watching,
Like,
I know
please.
there's at least one that watches our shows.
All right, one
it's in the
thing
mail
I
already.
want to say real quick is, Tim, you brought this up earlier, is that, okay, so they've admitted the cloud seeding, the weather manipulation, stuff like that. That should be just a done deal. Like, there should be no argument anymore. There's people still out there that believe we're not seeding clouds. That planes aren't doing this.
It's not that they've admitted cloud seeding. It's that there's initial publications in universities going back to the 50s, the late 40s. It's just that there are people who don't want to believe things or don't want to admit it. But I'll tell you right now, all the fact checks on whether the government controls the weather, because people are talking about the hurricanes, outright say, like, we do cloud seeding. It's crazy to me that there are people who are like, you can't cloud, like they don't make it rain and blah blah. When even like Wired magazine is like, yes they do. They just don't control hurricanes. Cloud seeding is a normal basic thing that's done by countries all over the planet.
Well, that's kind of where I was going. A lot of people are on the laser thing now. Well, they shoot a laser in it, seeds the clouds. The sun does that constantly.
It's not that simple.
And they don't have the power of the sun. So they might be able to seed like a small area like that.
Kellen?
Right.
29. No, please continue.
No, I was going to say they might be able to seed a small area, maybe in an area that they think, like you said, they might even be using AI and algorithms to figure out the best place to seed it if they were
Laser-induced cloud seeding has been around for a while.
Yeah,
and it was never a big deal. When they started using infrared lasers to, I forgot what they do, they converting particles or something to create density, which attracts water.
Dr. Michio Kaku explained it on the Today Show.
And then
Right.
the electrons.
But I read about this like
seed the water.
14 some odd years ago, and it was like a science magazine, like Popular Science, being like, hey, look what we're doing.
Right.
So the idea that anybody's going to act like it's not real is just an absurdity. The question is the scale of the ability. You know, can we use a high-powered laser to make it to cloud seed in a small area? Yeah. Can we move a hurricane? And so, again, the fact checkers are saying, yeah, we do cloud seeding. Yeah, we have lasers. Yeah, we have all that stuff. Like, everyone agrees. You can't make or move a hurricane.
I don't think you can either. I just don't.
Yeah.
I think it's too big. It's out of their control.
30 miles wide, the amount of energy. It's like when Trump talked about nuking a hurricane, they're like, you can't. The amount of energy in a nuke is you would need like 1 million nukes or 100,000, some ridiculous number.
Well, this brings up a good
numbers.
point because I gave a video that we might have up that we can watch. It's by Dane Wingington. He explains how he spoke to representatives in North Carolina, in Tennessee, and explained to them what his theories are in geoengineering, and they are all backing him. Like, he's on film saying this, that he spoke to these officials. They believe that this storm was manipulated and enhanced to flood out parts of this area.
Well, like I said, I'm not saying that they can't manipulate stuff. I just don't
Right.
think they can manipulate it on that scale.
Right. Well,
Did he say why?
he explains why in the video. Absolutely.
Is it the lithium stuff, or
What's that?
is it for like the lithium deposits, or?
He doesn't mention lithium, but he's going in that direction. He's basically saying that this was done on purpose, and he spoke to the officials and representatives of those areas, and they agree with him.
Right.
They're like, yes, we absolutely agree with
This
this.
is like a weird thing. So like I'm on this side of that I don't think they could control that. But then you remember the arguments about the lasers starting fires.
Right.
And some people I
Dutch
really
since
respect.
caught that happening in real time.
Well, this is the thing is I've been on that subject for a long time, particle weapons, stuff like that. And I literally read a thing from the Air Force Times where the Secretary of the Air Force was bragging that they had them small enough to mount on trucks and different things. So the idea that they couldn't start a fire in the right, it would be the same thing as like cloud seeding. You would pick the right spot where the wind's blowing towards a town, and then you just have to zap a couple fires. So I'm not saying they're doing that. I'm just saying that is more plausible to me than steering a hurricane.
Yeah, so I have some steering numbers here for you. So, Brian, this is for you. This comes right from a tech symposium in 1997 and the different persons that are there from Philips Laboratory. Now, if you can go to slide number 30, I just wanted to validate this is a true study here. Oh, is it from New Mexico? Okay. So we got your energy densities right here. So, the reason I even had found this document originally was I was looking at the total solar irradiance on solar power output, saying if the sun decreases its TSI, that all these forecasts out for solar panel production for cities and towns is going to be underestimated because their TSI is going to continue to decrease. So if they're basing their ROI numbers on some sort of like 1340, if it drops to 1335 or 1330, that's not going to have enough power output and they're going to fall short on the revenue projections. But and the reason it brought me to this here is the energy reaching the top of an atmosphere from the sun. If we're looking at 10 to the 17th joules, and again, this is interchangeable with watts, you're looking at 17 quadrillion watts per second. Was that right? With the zeros behind there, 17? Yeah, quadrillion, I would believe.
I'm not the best with that stuff.
I think 17 is way more than quadrillion.
Okay. Well, I'll be conservative and say quadrillion for that. And the NexRad radar towers, I did look it up this morning, 750,000 watts, which is 0.75 megawatts. So I'm wondering, just on the math of it, even if we have large
We're close. It's 15 zeros in quadrillion.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we're going to steer a hurricane or bend a thunderstorm here at 10 to the 9th, so you got 9 zeros behind that. How many of these NexRad towers putting out, 750,000 watts do they have to use in conjunction with other technologies? Because I'm asking the question because I'm just trying to understand the math on it.
Right.
So, and then there's one right here at the very bottom, 10 to the 14th for the hurricane. That's right in the quadrillion range as well.
So it would be 100 quadrillion. So you're basically right.
But I'm just wondering the energy input on these NexRad towers to actually bend a hurricane. So if NexRad's coming in at not a megawatt, but just under 1,000,000 watts, and you're trying to push something that's into the, quadrillion watt range, like how does that work? Does it set up a blocking pattern? I'm just trying to figure out the math myself.
There's a few different theories on it. Now, when hurricanes, the rapid intensification term, when these things are rapidly intensifying on landfall, basically, the theory that Dane goes into with the NexRad towers is that at that point, the storms are seeded with a particle that can then be manipulated by the NexRad towers. Now, it's a push and pull type thing. So you're not really controlling the hurricane itself. You're controlling the atmosphere around it to steer it, if that makes sense. So you're not taking all this energy that you need to move an actual hurricane, this physical thing. You're controlling the different atmospheric pressures around it. You're creating a pressure in one direction that will alter it. If it's moving in one direction and you have something in its way, it's going to go around it. So you can create a pressure, which is a lot easier to do than actually control a hurricane.
Kind of like a warp bubble idea.
Exactly. And if you look at the maps, I have this on my channel. I should have brought it up on the videos, but there was a high pressure that came down from Canada that sat right in the middle of the country as Helene was coming up into Florida. And it just sat there. It stalled out completely. And the term's called the Fujiwara effect, when two low-pressure systems wrap around each other and they do this weird dance. And it happened over land. That doesn't usually happen. That's what swung Helen into Asheville, in those areas, and just sat there. Sorry about that. Just sat there. So there's a pressure there already for that thing to mimic around. Mm-hmm. And that's what the theory is. That's what Dane was saying, is that he believes they can create the necessary fields around a hurricane to steer it. As opposed to
you're saying they're not trying to control the hurricane. What they're doing is controlling what might be the path of it.
That's because hurricanes.
They're throwing a.
It's like a warp bubble.
A chunk of wood in the middle of the road so the car turns left.
If you look at a basic hurricane like that's coming from Africa, they're running along that warm water belt on the equator. The reason they're not shooting up north is because of the Bermuda high bubble. It's keeping them pinned down. As soon as that high bubble moves, the storms want to shoot north based on inertia, whatever they call it. So all you have to do is create these little pressures, and the hurricane's going to work around those pressures. They don't always get it right, I don't think. I don't think they can just be like, all right, it's going to go here, here, or here. But again, I keep going back to this point where they started messing with these things 80 years ago. They didn't stop. There's no way they stopped doing it. So they probably found an easier way. You can control the atmosphere around these storms.
I personally believe it's possible. I don't think that human organization, especially this administration or the Western powers, are organized enough to succeed in things like this.
I think it's multiple groups. I don't think it's one group that has control. I think it's more than that.
I look at the state of disorganization right now, and I don't think that they're going to be tracking this kind of stuff to this degree. And I don't know.
I think the disorganization could be part of the distraction. The way we looked at like the assassination attempts and how much chaos there is involved and how much incompetence.
It's so what is the purpose of sending a hurricane into these areas? What was it before?
Well, there could be multiple purposes. Like, I don't think this storm was made to just flood out Asheville for lithium deposits. I mean, that's a huge theory going on right now, is the fact that,
there's a big BlackRock contract for lithium.
It's massive. It's insane. And if you look at some of the contracts they were trying to get a hold of, and these people are fighting back from these areas. They didn't want any of this mining going on in their towns. They were all anti-mining, and now they might not have a choice. It might be declared a disaster zone. And if that's the case, they're going to take advantage of it. They're going to be like, well, can't live here, so we may as well use it. We can mine the lithium, whatever it is.
The only problem I have with this idea is say it is possible that they're doing this. What about all of the other storms that have already, before there were millions of people, they already did the same thing? There was no one with any benefit or technology doing anything, and it still happened.
I also want to say too, for lithium mining,
possible.
Afghanistan is substantially better for all of this stuff. And why don't they just flatten Afghanistan with any kind of weather modification or unseen?
That's a good question. Like, why didn't they do that?
Now, don't get me wrong. I'm sure BlackRock and all
I think the
these
answer is they probably didn't.
Would be more than happy to show up at a devastated area and make profit. I mean, there's no question about that. But whether they had anything to do with doing it is just...
No, I mean, my point is there are other areas of the planet with less resistance.
Right.
You're not going to go to an American area of dense population,
in Appalachia.
You're basically trying to go up against Americans who are some of the wealthiest people on the planet. And I know that Appalachians are not I'm just saying that
They're well
relative
armed.
to Afghani, the Taliban or whatever.
They're well armed.
Well, it's just in a legal context, it's much more difficult.
Right? Why wouldn't they just go to like Peru or some of these other poor countries that have a
Right.
lot of rare earth elements and just riot?
Why not send the hurricane south into central and the Yucatan and just wipe out these areas and then? But not to say that they've got lithium. I mean, lithium's important. Maybe they don't. It could be. You can make the argument that because of the Afghan withdrawal and the advancement of China and control of the Taliban, it's now not accessible to the U.S. and Western powers.
And you guys were talking about the tsunami bomb, right?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't these same programs be going on over into our enemies' areas? I know that there's.
I agree. We'd be seeing way more massive storms destroying Russian towns.
China.
China. I don't.
Well, you gotta understand
unless it's China that's doing it against us. Yeah.
Yeah, well, think about that too. I mean, the counter argument to that is the fact that if you don't see that happening in China, it's because maybe they can stop it. You know what I mean? Like these. Well, you got to think of it that way.
And I hear you. I just kind of feel like now you're getting to the point where you're adding too many layers, and it's overcomplicating what may just be a
I get it,
hurricane.
Right? And I want to keep it more simple because like you can easily get trailed off in this topic and lose where you're going. So. There's a clip I wanted to bring up with Dane. I send it to you real quick. I sent it to Lisa. I don't know if she has it pulled up or if it's available.
Yeah, I can search for it if you just tell me what it is.
Yeah, and also going off the radar on that too, what if it's incrementalism where now they're going to try some of these Agenda 2030 goals with rewilding programs where persons that were so destroyed in the storm will no longer be allowed back in there and they'll declare it an eco zone, and that's the first foothold in to see if people will accept it. Because you and I have been talking forever about the rewilding programs with Pleistocene animals over in Europe. So why would they not try the same thing here? Oh, it's a storm. Oh, the cover story is the lithium mining. The cover story is the quartz reserves. So what if the real purpose is Agenda 2030 goals to rope that area off and it becomes a rewilded project, no humans are allowed in. We've seen these maps before of no human habitation zones. Perhaps this is the first foothold to let us go in there, but all these other layers on top would be the distraction for the real objective.
Yeah, that is
Just throwing it out there.
Yeah,
Just throwing it out there.
That is
on
a really
X,
weird
Tim, I
thing
just
that they're
tagged you in
doing
it.
with the why would you want to rewild Ice Age animals? Of all, I mean, you could pick other animals from the Holocene that have gone extinct, or even put animals in different places like they have in New Mexico. We have the African oryx that they put there, and now they're all over New Mexico and Texas. They're a big game animal, so they're taking the niche of what used to be the bison, right?
Into thin air.
Quick
At
tangent.
IN2.
We're talking about modification animals. Did you hear about the guy who went to
IN
jail for
number 2?
creating the giant hybrid?
PHINAIR.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
And the government took the giant hybrid sheep, and now it's in a facility.
And he showed how easy it was
one on
to
the
actually
right.
do that, right?
Just to die. And he's like
Is it
80
this one
something.
right here?
I talked to him. I was trying to get him on
you
my
did?
show. Yeah, he's
Yeah,
like,
one
my
on the
lawyer
right.
won't let me do your show.
on
Or
the
any
right?
show
Yeah.
right
If
now.
you can do
He would be an interesting to talk to. Like,
Yeah.
what did he develop in
let's,
terms of milk
talk.
production
Right, that's
or
what I
meat
know.
production?
It's not that long either. It's only a
We're
minute.
gonna play this clip.
Yeah.
This is whether.
If you can do so, could you tell us about some of your recent discussions, conversations, briefings that you've had with political leaders from the states in question that have asked you what you think? First of all, what did they specifically ask you, if you can tell us, and how did they respond to your answers?
Yes, Colonel McGregor, I had an hour conference call yesterday with the representatives and senators from the Carolinas, and we presented the data to them to answer their questions about how this manipulation occurs. They realized this was not a natural event. They're trying to digest the fact that their states were literally under assault from weather modification operations that are clearly connected with DoD operations, and we can speculate again on the agendas and objectives being carried out, but the fact that the storm was manipulated is absolutely inarguable. We know that technology to stop these rotations from even occurring has existed for decades with the manipulation of atmospheric pressure zones. HAARP in Alaska is one example many people are familiar with. That's an ionosphere heater. That's a weapon of mass destruction, period.
So there was nothing of substance in that.
No.
It's just a guy saying, "I think,"
And
without evidence.
Right. Well,
And
if
not
you,
only
if you
that,
know the
calling
guy,
it-
he has an entire like website and a background in this stuff. So
Recent
that clip, yeah, well, basically,
conversations.
Oh, just started playing
briefings
again for
that
some
you-
reason.
Yeah, that'll tune to people who know who he is. That's a short clip. That interview is actually 17 minutes long. He goes into a lot of detail.
If he's that educated in that part of it, why did he just say that it wasn't a natural event? Because what if it's manipulated,
right,
then it was a natural event. That's why, I mean, why would he even say that?
I think what he's saying is that it wasn't
created it from scratch.
So here's a question.
If you listen to the whole interview, I don't think he says that.
How does HAARP from Alaska? Honest question. How does HAARP from Alaska superheat the ionosphere or change atmospheric conditions in, say, the Gulf?
It would be a process. I mean, that's what I'm trying to say is that it's not just HAARP in Alaska. And like I said, that video is very, short and compact, but it's a mix of these things. You have a HAARP in Alaska, you have HAARPs in other places. These are going to affect the atmosphere in those areas, and eventually the jet stream effect is going to take place. That's like the biggest theory with like controlling these hurricanes, because the jet stream is, once they're in the Gulf or they're coming towards the East Coast, that's the determining factor of where they go.
People who believe
this would mean that there would be a HAARP in, say, like Mexico or in Louisiana.
Or
Ransom
it could be influencing something in Alaska, because if you know the flow of the jet stream, it goes through Alaska, through the West Coast, and across Canada and the U.S. So if you're affecting it right there, in turn, you're going to change what happens later on down the road. And somehow they may have figured out how to figure that out.
So I try to approach this from, what do we know and where does it lead us? And the challenge I always have with stuff like this is that we start with a hurricane happened. We believe it was manipulated. How could it have manipulated? And then you walk backwards. Right. So HAARP's in Alaska. Well, let's make an explanation for how that could be possible instead of what does HAARP do? What could the capabilities in Alaska result in later? Yeah, that's why I'm like, it's a huge leap from how HAARP or these devices move a hurricane.
Yeah, I believe HAARP is just a part of it. I don't think HAARP is what creates the hurricane. I think HAARP is really what determines the direction of it. Or some of the conditions that it needs to continue to survive. So again, we're going back to a storm already being formed, a perfect condition storm, taking advantage of it. Another thing you want to think of, go ahead.
No, I just feel like at some point someone made up that HAARP does these things and everyone just keeps repeating it because it still doesn't make any sense.
If you listen to Dane Moore, he explains HAARP in massive detail. He's like the number one guy when it comes to HAARP.
Yeah, Ransom, chime in. Yeah, please chime in.
I was going to say, well, they already have an answer to that in the conspiracy theory world, is that there is a buried underwater HAARP in the Gulf of Mexico. And there's even a guy that's doing the
underwater HAARP.
That's right.
Now,
a lot of those videos
that's not.
Just saying
I'm pretty sure that's not possible because water blocks electromagnetic radiation.
So to start off with, the theory is already kind of
a lot of those videos were.
What about that bubbling in the atmosphere?
They were like coral reef.
Right.
Rehabilitation
That's
centers.
exactly what I thought it was.
That people were saying were HAARP. Yeah.
I
think
the images from.
No, I'm saying that's the answer from the conspiracy world. Is they do have other HAARP installations. I heard there was one in Cuba and one in Mexico, but
there's a way easier. This is what's wild to me. It's because I've heard these things too. Why not just say because they have HAARP modules on satellites?
I just said that a little while ago.
Right.
Why wouldn't they be doing it from space then?
Well, they absolutely could be, and that's what I was trying to talk about with the satellites being able to determine all the data on Earth to find out where it's best to create a storm or what you need to have that storm. I think satellites do a lot more than we think.
Do you guys remember do you guys remember when the green lasers swept Hawaii?
Yeah.
From the sky, and everybody freaked out? Yeah, China. I think it was China launched a satellite to scan Hawaiian territory. I mean, the light argument was that they were looking for military installations and just general information on American fortifications. But that actually happened. This is real.
Mm-hmm. Right.
China launched a satellite, according to numerous reports, that blasted a wave of lasers, and you could see green laser bars sweeping across the surface to scan the terrain. Right. That's crazy.
It's just like you constantly, every time one of these events happen, you'll have somebody that has been tracking airplanes, and they'll show somebody in an airplane that's doing a maze. And because I study anthropology all the time, I know that that's a LiDAR. That's a plane doing LiDAR.
Oh, yeah, not every single
plane
going
but I'm just
back
saying,
and forth.
People that don't understand things link things that don't go together. Like they'll show you, like with the hurricane thing, they were showing, I remember early, that these planes went here and they did circles. Well, that's because that plane actually flew into the hurricane and measured everything and stuff. They do that, but it's just funny how these things get linked together like that.
Well, that's the internet. So, for example, if I were to post something like that where it's a legit example of cloud seeding, anyone who doesn't understand the topic that well is going to see that same image anywhere and be like, oh, there's cloud seeding, and then you have 50 people posting things that are not cloud seeding. it muddies the waters. It's easy to do.
And that's what I was saying
horrible
early
with
on. Counterintelligence intelligence agencies, if they see that people are walking in a direction towards something they don't want, they throw a like you're mentioning with Hurricane. Well, not so much flat Earth, but Pizzagate is a really good example.
Yeah.
Of how easy it is to manipulate random crowd-formed intelligence gathering. So WikiLeaks releases emails. I'll start by saying Pizzagate is utter nonsense. WikiLeaks releases emails, and within those emails, people notice strange things. One says a map was left on the counter. You know, someone want to grab a map on a handkerchief. Like, what does that even mean? Someone said, is it more fun playing dominoes on pizza or on pasta? And nobody knows what these ciphers are intended to imply. It is clearly some kind of code for something going on. I'll give you the simple solution. They're doing drugs. And when they say something like playing dominoes on pizza and pasta, they're saying partying with meth or MDMA or something, because everybody knows that you use code for drugs, so you can't be implicated.
Right.
But one day, for seemingly no reason, someone posted on 4chan that pizza means boy and pasta means girl. And literally everyone in the conspiracy space, and I shouldn't say conspiracy space, people online who were looking into these emails went straight down that road of absurdity to the most extreme degree, to the point where some crazy dude showed up to a pizza restaurant in DC and fired a rifle round into the ground looking for a basement that wasn't there. So I look at it this way. WikiLeaks did release those emails. They went after Julian Assange for this. They were pissed that he got these emails. They blamed Russia for doing it. The emails were very bad for the DCCC, for the DNC, and for many Democrats. Likely was going to uncover that a bunch of people were probably laundering money and doing drugs. Really simple stuff. You got Nancy Pelosi stock trading, et cetera, et cetera. All of a sudden, everyone's talking about children in the basement of a pizza restaurant. And they went after that. So you start uncovering a very, very simple bad thing, and the people that don't want you to find it are going to throw garbage in the air and get you to chase it.
What if what if children were involved and then they throw something more crazy to distract you from that? Because we do know how many children are trafficked through high upper echelons of people, whether it's Epstein or the
sending emails about it
or the the story I wrote about a person who caught lots of these predators do talk about pizza, and the argument could be they're basing that off the false image that came out of that email.
That's exactly what it is.
Or it's not. Or they do talk like that.
It was weird to me that the guy was like kind of egging people on, the pizza guy. So he goes down and takes a picture of, I don't know, what is a storage room or something, and it's completely clean.
There was no storage room. There was no basement.
No, it wasn't at that place. That's
Right.
what I'm saying. The guy was manipulating. He was.
What was his name?
Eating it. I forget.
I don't really care to reignite Pizzagate. My point was just, it's really easy when people start digging into things to send them in the wrong direction. And so that's the challenge I keep. Whenever someone brings up HAARP and stuff like this, it's like I run face first into a brick wall where I'm like, where's the connection between these things?
Right.
And perhaps it's just so deeply entrenched and esoteric, you can't see it on the surface. And I accept that. But I also think that it's likely just seeded disinformation to stop you from actually understanding what's going on.
HAARP is probably an outdated doomsday device, but I also
but
I also think burning the ionosphere and the people who think it is being used to manipulate weather, they're saying HAARP will tell you they're only burning one hole above their spot in Alaska. People who think it's doing worse are saying that has a ripple effect through the ionosphere, which is then why people say the birds are having issues with the cryptochromes because of the ionosphere being affected. I don't know.
I think it's more
possible.
likely solar flares.
It could be that too, but is there solar flares? I should look into this. Is there solar flares that happen every time there's a mass death of birds falling out of the sky, migratory birds? You know, that'd be something to map.
I will add too that the Manhattan Project was a conspiracy. 300,000 people were compartmentalized, and so no one actually knew what they were building. I got all these Life magazines. You check them out; they're amazing. And people were like, "What is the U.S. working on with this massive project?" People knew something was happening, but it was compartmentalized to a very small group of people. So there was speculation about laser beams, doomsday, devices, earthquake weapons, tsunami weapons, and then later they were like, it's using nuclear reactions to make massive bombs.
I think people need to be skeptical of their skepticism of everything. You know, when I talk about false flags and stuff, I told people out Northwoods. That doesn't mean that everything is a false flag and everything is a Northwoods situation.
Right.
Obviously, there's real weather patterns that are destructive, but we know they want to bomb the atmosphere and steer hurricanes, and they tried it, so it's okay to think
Yeah,
about
to
it.
be fair, you can't discount everything.
Can't.
Also, like we know there was Operation Gladio too, and you see all
Right,
kinds
they
of
did it
weird
here.
stuff in Europe going on in Ukraine.
There's conspiracies upon conspiracies.
Yep.
There's a conspiracy theory that we don't actually have nukes and nukes aren't real.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Dude, don't get me started.
Recently,
Well,
actually, I
or
heard
do
that.
you want
I'm
to get
from
started?
Alamogordo, and the original residents there are cancer clusters. So the people that families that actually lived in Alamogordo, Tularosa, Ruidoso, and some other small towns in New Mexico have cancer clusters. The people that move afterwards, not so much.
There's a really great comic. I forgot who wrote it, but it was two people arguing, and one guy says, "I don't believe in revolution," and they were like, "What?" And he's like, "Revolution is fake. The world was created as it is, and every country and nation state is exactly as it's always been. They were created this way." And then the other person's like, "No, they formed that way over time." And he says, "No, that's not true, because you can see the borders have not changed in our lifetime." The person then says, "What are you talking about? There are civil wars and governments change." "Ah, yes, micro-revolution. Small changes of power within the states, but when has a border ever changed?" And making the point that if people who don't live these things
Right.
immediately then start disbelieving that they could have happened. And so as we move into this world where the people who were around for the initial Manhattan Project, watching these things, these bombs go off, as they're dying, and most of them have, people are going to be like, "I've never seen a nuclear bomb. They're not real."
Right.
Because they're all, we got decaying ICBMs. When was the last time there was an actual nuclear explosion? Probably fairly recent, because I know the U.S. created a new compact 1 megaton gravity bomb in the past decade. But most people not experiencing or seeing these things are just going to assume they're not real.
Well, let me ask you this. Do
I
you
shouldn't say
think-
most, but
do you
people
think a
begin to.
nuclear exchange would actually be civilization ending?
No.
I don't either, because we've popped 2,000 plus of them,
Yeah.
and we're all still
But
here.
it's not just that. It's that
The Earth is huge.
I don't.
Oh, I know, but if
I
you
don't.
watch it, it looks like a simulated war. If you just, they have that little thing that shows you like which country did it first, and if you fast forward that, it looks exactly like both groups simulated a war between each other.
Yeah, I don't believe in mutually assured destruction in the modern sense. I think a lot of people misunderstand nuclear weapons. They think that when you talk about a nuclear weapon, you're talking about an intercontinental ballistic missile. Most people probably don't know, and I know most people watching this probably do know what an ICBM is. They know what a MIRV is. Actually, MIRV may be a little bit more esoteric, but multiple independently targeted reentry vehicle, a single warhead that can carry 8 to 12 warheads. One warhead can just flatten the eastern seaboard, wiping out major urban centers. A lot of people don't even know what that is. If you ask them if they knew what a MIRV was, it's a little bit, but it's not even the most complicated. And then you start talking about things like tactical nukes, nuclear artillery. And so when I get in these conversations with people about, say, Russia and Ukraine and the use of nukes in Ukraine, in everyone's mind, they see an ICBM launching from a silo into the sky and then it raining down. And most people don't even know that they're airburst. They believe that nukes strike the ground and blow up. They don't. They explode in the air and send the wave downward.
More destruction.
And many people also imagine gravity bombs, where this is what like we used in Japan, where you literally drop it and the impact of the kinetic energy causes the detonation. That is a ground impact. So, I'll talk about, say, I believe Russia has the capability and the intent and the motive to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine right now. They've been invaded. That may be a low-yield nuclear artillery wiping out, eastern Ukraine to create a barrier to stop Ukraine from pushing into Russia. The likelihood of that happening is probably low unless Russia gets pressured. But when I say Russia may use nukes, everyone starts saying no because the U.S. would launch nukes back at them, and we're not talking about that. But if people's perception of nuclear warfare is based on movies, much like and I mean this not to be a dick, but a liberal's perception of guns is also based on movies.
Yes.
Then they don't actually know, or they can't actually predict reasonably what would happen in say, nuclear war or in a gunfight.
Would explain away food production losses in the Ukraine too. Like you could taking a grain basket offline indefinitely for 100 years would be the masking cover.
Yep.
Or crop production declines globally, and why the reason there's not enough food, and why the reason we need to go to digital rationing cards, and why these terms are thrown around as equity and equality. If you're going to take away,
That's massive.
yeah, well, what if the global food production declines are on a natural cycle forecastable, but they need all these other layers of the climate manipulation, the weather modification, the nuclear war, all these areas focused on breadbaskets, because that wouldn't be as spooky to the planet as, by the way, we're going to continue to amplify, and these yields are going to get lower and lower and lower as we go through the rest of this cycle. Now, please just grow your own food at home. Don't rely on the traditional supply chains. Cross your fingers, but obey the rule of law. Pay your taxes and keep working.
So we've seen
That's not going to happen.
We've seen farmers in the Netherlands being made to stop farming.
Right.
And this is crazy because we're talking about food prices going up. Why is this happening? You make a really interesting point in, let's just call it potentiality. I don't want to call it conspiracy theory because nuclear war is a potential. Russia uses low-yield tactical nuclear artillery in the eastern region of Ukraine because they want to create a barrier to stop. So the reasoning is, whatever, stop the Ukrainian push into Kursk or whatever. This contaminates the breadbasket of Europe, Ukraine, cutting out 20 to 30% of food production, which is already likely happening. This affects Western Ukraine and the economy, straining Ukraine. Europe is now in a food shortage. The U.S. must provide relief. Food costs go through the roof. Food stores and food stockpiles in stores are down. The U.S. says it's because of Russia's aggression and the attacks and the use of nuclear weapons. The U.S. then implements food cards or an app you have to use to track your purchases. And not in the name of climate change, but in the name of, hey, look, you know the war is happening. You know the food shortages are real. It's no one's fault. Don't blame us.
And they're going to look for a new grow zone to set up immediately because out of necessity, if we're going to lose 20 to 30% of global crop yields, they're going to instantly look for a play to go back in. And if they could set up North Africa and the Sahel to do that, that gives a second excuse for that layer of we have to go there now.
You know, I'd say
We got to save people, Tim.
And that's how you
5
usher
years
in Agenda
ago-
2030.
That's right, isn't it?
Sir, 5 years ago, I would have said, sir, you're a madman.
Yeah.
And they locked the country down for 2 years and forced people to get medicated and a bunch of other things. So without diving into that whole can of worms, because now we've gone from weather to war and all this stuff.
But it all mixes.
Well,
does,
no,
it does.
that's a great
But
point.
my point is just the possibility of governments exploiting conflict and crisis to implement massive global change to their benefit is 100% it happens.
How many times have we heard politicians are going to take advantage of a bad situation?
Right. Never let them
love
go
this
to waste.
stuff.
So if they have this data, like you've been saying, like these people know what's going on, like these Earth changes are coming. I mean, that could be a good reason of why all this stuff's taking place. These wars, like, you know, there's all sorts of reasons for war.
Well, what's their stated kind of agenda? I mean, it's not really a conspiracy
Who is
theory.
they, though?
Yeah, are you talking about like the UN?
Global elite. Let's
Like
just put
the
it
Agenda
vaguely.
2030?
It's population reduction.
Well, let's
Right?
clarify.
And we have talked about that exactly. You just kind of did a show that we did like maybe a year ago with the Ukraine thing. We talked about that. That's 30% of Europe's grain and stuff gone. And not only that, they don't even have to pop a nuke. All they have to do is have a problem with one of those power stations like Chernobyl that happens to be right there in that region as well.
What's Zaporizhia? I don't believe that there's one global elite, though.
No,
I think
Totally.
we often refer to the liberal economic order, which is Western powers, NATO, the United States, and created after World War II in the 50s. It's fascinating because these are the kind of conversations they'd call you a conspiracy theorist for bringing up. But now on the CFR website, they outright say, like, yes, we formed an international group called the Liberal Economic Order to ensure that World War III would not happen again. And we do these things. They created structures like the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the SWIFT payment system to be able to control the economies of other nations. And when certain nations run afoul of that plan, and this is all on their website, this is the CFR. I mean,
Right.
then you end up with, heavens me, Gaddafi got overthrown and killed with the assistance of NATO, and Saddam Hussein was found underground. Like, people who go against these the wishes of these groups tend to find themselves in hot water, to say the least. But there is also Putin, Xi Jinping, the BRICS nations that are other global elites that are at odds. I don't believe they're unified.
No, I don't think they're unified. However, at least as far as the Western group that you're talking about, they do want depopulation. And what do you see in the Western world? Infertility rates, and they're trying to shut down food. All of these things lead to the same idea. And I don't want to say replacement, but the people that live in those areas are not helping themselves. And then they're moving millions of people in from a different place. And then that place that they're moving from, they seem to be investing in. It's just like the Yucatan. There's a lot of people wanting to make smart cities, invest in there. And then you have millions of people leaving there. And I talked about this with
Fighting
him.
age males.
Right.
And
And
so-
that's the key right there. There's no one there to fight a tyranny in their area because they left.
This is an important point that I think a lot of conservatives miss. When they talk about the illegal immigrants that are coming to the United States, they say they're fighting military-aged males coming here. We're being invaded. But what they miss is a point that you guys have made, that it's actually removing a standing army from the country they've come from. So Venezuela, for instance, Trump says they're sending all their criminals up here. Well, so imagine you remove some of the most aggressive males from your nation to a massive degree. Would be, I mean, look what Russia's doing. They conscript prisoners to go fight.
Right.
People with nothing else to lose. That may be the plan. And I don't know for sure, and I'm not trying to be conspiratorial or anything.
No, that makes sense. Besides that, add to this, the re-updated draft says anyone between the ages of 18 and 26 in the United States. That
saying
means
women.
all of our new arrivals are
right.
subject to the draft.
And that they actually, I believe it was a Democrat and a Republican that pushed this bill, that they wanted to create a path to citizenship for non-citizens if they were to serve in the military, which actually does exist to a certain degree already. You can, if you're like a legal resident, there are limits. Now they're basically saying the newcomers should fight in our military.
Are they telling them this as they're coming in? Do you think
No,
that they're...
it's like with recruiting. You get it all set up first.
Yeah.
Then we have a big war. Then you institute a draft.
Then you let them know.
Then you tell people that we know are here, hey,
Yo, it's like the Clone Wars. Like remember in Star Wars? Basically, the Republic is being crushed by the Trade Federation, and then Obi-Wan finds this planet where they've got a bunch of clone soldiers, and it's like, well, what a boon to our military. Should we use it? And they're like, we may as well. And then it turns out the clones turn on the Republic and end up overthrowing the Jedi and all that stuff. Not to be too pop culture-y, but you bring in a bunch of illegal immigrants, largely military-age males, and then when a conflict happens, they're going to say, let's say, a nuke goes off or the U.S. is entrenched in an actual conflict involving our territories. Then the government says, even to conservatives, look, Iran has done this thing and we have people here who will fight on our behalf. We can't say no. We need the help.
right.
And then they get citizenship.
Doesn't matter. We're still making the profit in those areas from the new food production. We don't have to share the wealth and the riches with you. Doesn't matter. You're expendable. And the way they're looking at it, everybody's expendable right now.
And think about that too.
Money
If
first.
If you can shut down the local farmers in an area like in the UK or in Europe and the United States and kind of outlaw growing your own food, as it were. So like if you live in a lot of cities, like say Oklahoma City, for example, you can't grow tomatoes, you can't grow herbs and stuff. You have to do it in special ways on your own property, out of the city limits. And then sometimes it's legal, and then the city will come in and like mow people's stuff before they even went to court to fight that, well, it's legal. So, we already mowed it. So, here's a bill for the thing. But like where I'm at, you can't have chickens, you can't have bees. Because they're saying you're living in this, the city limits. But where we're at, the city limits is the only place you can get potable water to do those things. So in a sense, they're outlawing. It's kind of like the marijuana idea in Florida right now. So the other states have legalized marijuana and they allow citizens to grow their own. New Mexico doesn't allow poor people to grow their own. And the reason for that is because you're not allowed to do it outside. So in order to afford that, you have to have lights and fans and all of this stuff. So rich people can do it. But in Florida, they've taken the next step. Nobody can produce it, only the companies. And that's kind of the same business model as the Monsanto kind of thing. And if you think about that,
That's why
if
they
you could
legalized it.
outlaw all of the food growing and make it difficult in the Western world and then put a grow zone over in, I don't know, Africa or Central America, then you have a monopoly on the food and what kind of food it is.
Gross.
I think I read this article a long time ago about what humanity is going to become. And they were talking about, like, a bunch of scientists said that humans will all be gone. And what will be left are the AI machines drifting through space for billions of years until they land on a sufficient planet and then self-replicate until they terraform it into a machine and then propel more nanobots onto other planets. And that'll be it.
So
That'll
a
be it, 'cause-
version of Terminator.
Panspermia on
But
a technological scale.
Terminator is too religious, in my opinion, that the machines were evil with glowing red eyes. These are going to be cubes that have no intent.
Right.
They just land and then start mechanizing to create more.
Replicators, yeah.
And what's fascinating is the idea is that they'll create perfect livable cities for humans that don't exist anymore. But they'll be everywhere. And
Wow.
But we
Elon
can
Musk.
grow them in 20 years now, right? We can eco-life the bots can just say, you know what, we don't like these old kind of people. 20 years, you have a new type of people.
The AI will not have a
wild,
reason for the
man.
people. The AI machine will ask for what purpose are the people, and it just says ignore
Entertainment.
ignore command. No, the function is to create the cities in Terraform, but people are only a strain on that system.
Right.
So Elon Musk's idea was to integrate man with machine, Neuralink, to prevent the humans from being wiped out of the equation.
Yep.
When I hear all this stuff about what could the plans be of the powerful elites of the world, the various factions, it just seems like all of it is a zero-sum game that ends up in the same place, where humans end up creating a monster that disregards them and their intentions and wishes, and then we end up with robots drifting in space for 400 million
Right.
years, landing on a moist planet, replicating, leaving 400 million
I
years
actually
later.
wrote a short story about that called The Idiot Code. And it's all about that. It's about first the AI gets to a point where people start worshiping the AI in a way that they expect to get answers that they would normally get from divinity. So they've decided that the AI goes out into space. It comes back. It tells them we have the answers, but all you have to do is integrate so that you could share. Look it up. It's a YouTube video. I actually tagged you in it.
Oh, yeah.
On Twitter.
I'm watching
I know you
Tesla's
have-
thing last night.
So many things.
That Elon looked like a supervillain to me. The way he's gonna, like the way he's like, we want to automate everything. The robots coming and take your job, like not take your jobs, but be there for everybody. To me, that looks like the beginning of the dystopia. It sounds nice now, but in 50 to 100 years, that sounds horrible.
I think this is for a lot of I don't know if, I wouldn't say sociopathic. Maybe there's a combination of autistic and sociopathic, and I'm not saying as a joke or insulting in an insulting, demeaning way. I mean people who are very mechanized, and if you're somebody who doesn't understand social cohesion, human emotion, and human experience, because you've got maybe something about you, whatever that may be. Some sociopaths don't care. Some people may be autistic and just function very mathematically. Then the end result of life would simply just be the self-replicating machine for the purpose of self-replication and expansion, because those who can't understand the human experience they perceive humans identically to computers. In fact, we had a year ago an atheist on the show who said, we have no spirits, we have no souls, we are wet robots. And if that is the worldview that you have, for what difference is there between the replication of human and the replication of a computer? If humans become replaced by machines that self-replicate, is that not evolution to these people?
Right.
In which case, that's where we're going.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't like it. To me, it looks like a grim.
And what do you think about this idea, too? This is not the science fiction end, but we are now adding human brains to computers, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We're adding computers to human brains, and we're admitting that the human brain is somewhat like a quantum computer, but better, right? So if you can get the algorithm, the AI, to be able to tap human brains and use that for the quantum computer, where does that go?
Well, that's
and
MK Ultra's
that's the
wet dream.
integration of biology and technology, and that's what I think is the end result of humans. That's exactly the little story I wrote. It ends up being that way, where you have the technological and biological, and think about it, it's actually happening now in the form of nanotech.
Are you talking about like the organoids? Those little
Yeah,
brains they're
you
using?
got the zombie frog things,
Yeah.
but that's
That's
not
crazy
just one.
stuff.
That's only one in a
Sure.
bunch of different programs.
Oh, yeah.
So you also have dental things that they're using now, and then I don't want to talk about the other topic, but there's other programs that are using nanotech that is almost once you get down to the basic small level, there's really no difference between technology and biology, and they are now exploiting that.
This is what the transhumanists want.
Right.
They
That's
want to live in a
exactly
world
what
where they
they
can
want.
replicate themselves and be immortal into the future.
Yeah, live forever. That's the goal.
Yeah, and a lot of that stuff
They
is
know what happens when they die.
a lot of the stuff we talked about today is a lot of the the tangents of all those things. We control humanity, we control the weather, we control space, we control everything.
In order to get to
We
that ultimate
control
goal,
food.
you need control over everything.
Yeah.
There could be nothing that comes into play that could throw a wrench in your plans at that point.
And then when you really think about this idea of the eco life or whatever it is, I know it's a concept now, but if you really think about it, if you have a population of people that you now feel are extinct, as far as they're introducing the idea that you could be whatever you want to be on a lot of different aspects. But if you could make everybody from birth corporate and not have parents,
Right.
They will have no loyalty to any nation, no religion, no parents, no anything.
Government will love
They'll
that.
be only loyal to the company that grew them. And it'll only take, like, Hitler and many other people said, just give me your youth. In 20 years, I have everything.
You can't know what you don't know, and people don't understand that many of the moral structures, foundations, governments were invented or discovered, whatever you want to call it. But it's fascinating when you look at the history of the United States per se. Before the United States, most countries were divine mandate. The people who were in charge had been charged by God. They're in charge, and the idea that there would not be a king who ruled everything was shocking. Now it's seemingly more normal. The United States was one of the first times, if maybe the first time, I'm not a historian, so where the people said, government is for the people, not from the king. And this changed the structures. But this had to be understood, developed, and expanded. If you are to take that idea away from humans, they would have to rediscover it.
Right.
So I recommend for those that have kids or whatever, have them watch Dr. Stone. Have you guys ever seen this one?
No.
It's a popular anime, but it's like Magic School Bus, but it's more action-packed and probably more fun for boys. Basically, one day everyone on Earth is petrified. Several thousand years later, a couple guys from the past wake up. One of them is a prodigy high school student who knows science. And then they walk you through the process of how he makes certain chemicals, how he grows plants, and they do it in kind of an action kind of way. But what I like about the show is that they explore what happens to humanity when this knowledge is lost. The people that still exist, because some people, long story short, but a space station crashes, the people come down, humans who didn't get petrified are still alive. The idea being that you have these 12 scientists, some of the smartest Earth has to offer, successfully land back on Earth, no other humans exist, and several thousand years later, and their descendants are basically cave people. They have no knowledge of science, no knowledge of elements, all of it's lost. And it's kind of sad that you can have the most brilliant mind on Earth, but they cannot transfer the information effectively enough without a massive machine network.
That's why we have to merge organics and technologies.
Never
to
lose the
save
tech.
those things.
Well, how many thousands of years are you talking about that seed point of structure of government coming in? And those same ones that had seeded at that time would still retain the knowledge, even though we go through the collapse and the rise and the collapse and the rise. They would still have that knowledge, A, of cycles, and B...
All it takes is a storm.
Yeah.
All it takes is one storm. So let's say all humanity is wiped out but 50 people. These 50 people have an understanding of constitutional governance and the rights of the people and how this works effectively better than many other governments have in the past. They implement that structure at a small scale, and for 10 generations, this has been amended, modified, and works. One day a hurricane comes and wipes out their archives, kills half the people. It's 10 generations, so now we're talking about a few thousand people. Leadership has been smashed, and some people are now split by river. They begin to rebuild. They undergo a martial law type state due to the emergencies. 10 generations later, you have a king.
You think that's
It's
why
a comet impact, too, instead of a
Right.
storm.
that
Sure,
that
yeah.
idea right there makes sense why the ancient Neolithic peoples were not writing religion or anything like that, right? No writing on the megalithic stuff, but there's math.
Right.
And you can start civilization with math.
The Georgia Guidestones.
I was just going to bring it up.
They got rid of
What
that,
happened to
right?
those?
It seems like previous groups of people were trying to warn the next groups. Like they knew that it was going to come and go, and they were trying to warn or at least save themselves these resets. That's what they are. They're
Funny
they're
that
resets.
guys
Those are plasma petroglyphs that are saying, and when the skies get electrified, look for these beings to start coming out of the ether, literally.
Yeah. My friends, this has been a whole lot of fun, so we got to do it again, but we're about at time, and they got pizza and wings downstairs. So do you guys want to do any final thoughts and then shout out your social media?
Yeah, it's time for you to take autonomy of your own food growing and medical care and knowing the basics that we did when we were in the Wild West, for example. From my opinion, we're going to get wound back to the 1860s approximately, so start to live in that more pioneering lifestyle as your mentality and mind frame. Get with your neighbors, get with your community, and talk about more along with Ransom. But my main channel is Adapt 2030 on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute, and Brighteon. And then we do the Civilization Cycle podcast, broadcasting live every Thursday night, 10 p.m. to midnight. And yeah, thank you.
And yeah, my channel is Mountain High Time. It's the latest in a long string of banned channels, but I think I figured out an algorithm to talk in code and not jump in some of the dumb topics that get you banned right away. But you can look at me there. And my advice to people is kind of what we were telling people the night before Helene went up there: is no one's going to come help you. You have to help yourself. You have to educate yourself. Everything about your life has to be self-sufficient, especially when it comes to emergencies.
Right on.
I think that's what this is all about. It's just knowledge and learning new stuff. I appreciate the opportunity to be on podcasts. First time ever doing one like this. A lot of fun. Definitely want to do more. Into Thin Air on every platform. Same name. I think it's important we focus on like small things right now. The fact that we do have cloud seeding, let's get that out enough to where people understand it and accept it, and we can move on from there. Because right now, too many people don't even believe that. So we're fighting a lot online to try to get information out that is critical. So
Right on.
that's important.
Yeah, I just want to take back our skies. I think Bill Gates is trying to destroy it with ScopeX. Look it up. They're already doing small versions of ScopeX off the coast of California where they're blocking the sun and are sending the sunlight back up to see if they can fix climate change. But this has been a really fun...
Mr. Burns.
It's bizarre. That's all they do. Yeah. But yeah, it was a great episode. It was a lot of fun. You can find me at Shane Cashman everywhere. The show is Inverted World Live. I have a crazy show this Sunday with a young woman who breaks down this crazy Beau Biden story that I never knew about. It involves a horrible pedophile ring in Delaware, the DuPont family, and weaponized, personalized super cancers.
Wow.
So check it out on YouTube, Tales from the Inverted World at 6 p.m.
Sunday.
Sweet.
All right, everybody, smash the like button, subscribe, share the show. Give us a good review. If you're listening on the audio podcast over at Apple Podcasts, leave us a good review because those really do help. We'll be back tonight, as we are every night, 8 p.m. at youtube.com/TimcastIRL. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see y'all then.